All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of You can tell how rusty I am already. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been about 7 months since I've got any time to record an episode of this. So let me try that again. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Excess Exceed. This is Gearface. And I'm joined for the first time in 7 months by my good friend D. D, thank you so much for being here.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. It's always a pleasure talking to you. Um, in the last 7 months, I've moved into a new house. I've gotten all sorts of parts of my life in order, but I missed being able to talk about Exceed excessively. So I'm back to learn a couple new characters. Among them is Tournelouse. Tournelouse. We'll figure it out. D, do you have any advice on how to pronounce this man's name?
If I gave you that advice, I would then advise you to edit it out. I have no idea how to pronounce this person's name.
All right, cool.
Um,
We'll
I call
we'll
him I
figure it
call
out
him
as we go.
Turney.
Turney? All right, sure. Um, we're and I've been told that D is the person to talk to about All Turney here. So looking forward to it. I believe I'm supposed to have a couple disclaimers before we get started here. Don't remember them whatsoever. Let's see if we can figure them out. I feel like one of them is that you should play Exceed for fun. The lines that we're going to be describing here are for how to play to win with the character. That might not necessarily be how you want to play or how you have fun playing, and I advise you, as your official Exceed expert, to play the game the way that you do find fun, rather than do so the way that we're describing. And then I believe disclaimer number two is something about how, even though D is an expert, his word is not gospel. He has assured me that he has gotten things wrong about this game before, although I've never seen it myself. Um, Take all of our advice with a grain of salt. If you have a line of play that we're not representing here, that doesn't mean that your line of play is wrong and our line of play is right. Please tell us why we're wrong.
Yeah, I have no particular authority or divine inspiration concerning how I play this character. If you look at what I'm describing and think that doesn't look like correct or fun or whatever, then play the character your way. I highly recommend that people seek out their own alternative play styles.
Nice, 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 nice. I also feel like, I mean, I was not around for the Seventh Cross days, D, but going back and looking at the roster here, I feel like I hear a lot more. Maybe this is because of people I talk to. I hear a lot more about Imogene and Remulus, and even people like Zolt or Umina, in terms of the characters that have really been figured out and had a huge amount of representation back in the day. I feel like there's an excellent chance that Turney is going to be a character that uh, has been overlooked or not studied quite as extensively. Is that accurate?
Um, I'll explain in a certain way. I think he is simultaneously the most Seventh Cross character and the least Seventh Cross character, and I think that contributes a lot toward the general impression of yeah, there's not really the solved tourney line.
Okay. So speaking to that disclaimer that we just gave, as we're talking through this character, maybe slightly. Sometimes I say when we're talking about a Seventh Cross character that there is like a line, a very, very established, like people have, Exceed is not a solved game, but if there was going to be a solved game of Exceed, it would be in season two, where people really have drilled these matchups. It was in competitive rotation for a long time. Maybe slightly less so with Turney.
Yeah,
Okay.
he there were relatively few tourney mains among the most active competitive players. Not zero. Like I cannot claim, and I myself I actually wouldn't describe myself as a tourney main. I did play him a lot. I feel like I understand him pretty well. Um, I like to think that I know what I'm doing with him. But I myself never had my own. Here's the how you play Tournelouse guide that I wrote, like I did for Roomless or Imogene. Um, I know a few other people who put forth their own lines for tourney, but um, changed them, and I'm not sure where they sit now. But I have my own theories. Um, anyway, yeah, play the character any way that you want to play. If you come up with cool stuff, or if there's stuff that I don't mention that you think ought to be, drop us a line.
Yeah, please
Um,
do. So
mhm.
shall we get into it?
Yeah, let's. I will set aside these other characters to be a brick, and then let's first explain what I meant by the most and the least Seven Cross character. So in
Yeah.
Seven Cross, the the mechanic shared across all the characters is transformations, permanent upgrades to your character, which take the place of your boosts. So you hit with an attack that has one of these doohickeys at the bottom. You put it into play. Now for the rest of the game, you have whatever it is. You don't get gauge for the attack, generally speaking. You can't have two of the same transformation. And also, you can put them into play without hitting with the attack, which is probably the most notorious part of this mechanic, is that without ever striking, you can accumulate enough pseudo gauge to exceed, because each transformation you have in play reduces your exceed cost by 2.
Right.
So noting that Tournelouse has 7 transformations, he can discount his exceed cost by an awesome 14.
Wait a minute. I'm seeing. Hold on. Now, D, normally there's a number here and it's not 0 for the exceed cost.
Must be a misprint. That's the only explanation.
It's probably 10, right? They just couldn't
Yeah,
fit
they
the
left
1
off
in.
the
He's got
1.
a 10 gauge exceed cost, and then he can discount it by 14. Okay.
Yeah, although in
Now,
fact he could discount it by much more than that, but we'll come back to
okay. Now I've also noticed. Now normally, uh, it, we're able to. I say something about now. You can tell that that these are transformations on the bottom of the card because it's white text on a black background, as contrasted with the boosts that we would normally see in a character. But I need to go all the way over to our normals here to see
that.
what a character would actually normally have in their boost kit. Tournelouse doesn't have any special boosts.
Correct. Not a 1.
Okay, he's only a transform character. That's all he's got.
That's all he's got. That's in his special ultra kit. So what makes him the most 7th cross character is indeed he has lots of transformations. Everything's a transformation. In fact, his ability says even normals are transformations.
Okay.
Transformations bloody all over the place, everywhere. Covering up your whole table. Everything's a transformation. And actually, he can have even more transformations than anyone else in play, because he could potentially transform in a magical, perfect world 23 cards.
That's
That
a
would not be a
really
perfect
cheap
world. That
exceed
would be a
mode.
really
But
silly world.
at that point, he's discounted his exceed mode by a whole lot.
Yes. And also, the game ended quite a while ago. I'm not sure how we got to 23, but if I've done the math right, that is the hypothetical highest number.
Okay.
I myself have not done this. I don't think anyone ever should do that. It's besides being very time consuming, it also just might not be a good idea. So here's a question. Let's start with you hit with sweep. This is a believable case. A lot of people hit with sweep. It's a good card.
Sure.
You now have a choice between I will take 1 gauge right now and have a resource that I can spend as force to move around, to change cards, do things that I spend force on. Mostly those 2 things. Or I can have, for the rest of the game, all of my specials and ultras deal 1 more damage, which you will note my damage mostly doesn't exist. But the cost of that is not I don't get gauge. The cost of that is I don't get gauge, and also I remove a copy of sweep from the game forever.
Oh, okay. So it's not really reasonable to describe this in terms of like short-term payoff as a resource versus long-term investment with stronger attacks, because there's a long-term implication to not having another copy of sweep after I reshuffle, or I don't know if he's got recursion anywhere in his kit, but this isn't strictly short-term versus long-term.
Correct.
Okay.
There is a very real long-term cost to removing these from play, which is also true of every transformation character to an extent, but the payoff almost always outweighs the penalty.
Right.
I will talk
It's
them.
quite rare in previous guides that we've done of 7th cross characters where we talk about situations where, all right, you've hit with a transform, put it in gauge. Don't even worry about the transformation. The gauge is more valuable. Those situations happen sometimes, but for the most part, most 7th cross characters are spending a lot of time trying to land these transforms.
Mm-hmm. Whereas if you are putting your normals into your transformation area, then for the most part, what you're saying is, I'm never going to need that attack or that boost again.
Right.
I'm okay with 1 copy of that card. I will never have lights, or I'll never have tech, or I'll never have reading. Well, I should say never. I'll have 1 copy of tech. I'll have 1 copy of reading.
Right. This particular copy is not accessible to me anymore. And I mean, as a judgment call, we are now 9 minutes into this lesson, D. As a judgment call, my immediate thought is, but I like all these cards and I want to see them again. And then the other side of me is saying, wow, 0 is not a big number for power. 1 is not a big number for power. So clearly I want some amount. I want to be doing this occasionally. Are you telling me that this
Mhm.
character is a character who has to make decisions with their resources?
It's horrifying, I know. It's really the worst case. Having to make decisions about how your cards work. Actually, let me just go ahead and declare the central point I was going to try to bring out at some point, which is that Tourney is the least seventh cross character because he is not just I make my engine and it goes burr and the opponent is minced into tiny pieces. He has to use the normals more adeptly than pretty much anyone, and the decisions he's making about how to use his normals are so core to his identity that I think of him as actually being a very normals oriented character,
Yeah.
despite looking like he's all this weird stuff. Like,
Yeah. Well, I
in
mean, I
fact,
mean, I'm sorry.
he's
Go
very
ahead.
normals oriented. Please read these transformations.
Your normal attacks have 2 guard. Your normal attacks have +1 power. Your normal attacks have +1 armor. Yeah. Okay. So he's definitely
And these.
normal attacks. Normal attacks. It seems like there's a theme here. So
Yeah.
his normals have a transformation on them that affect his specials and ultras. His specials
Mhm.
have transformations on them that affect his normals. So there's going to be sort of a positive feedback loop in with one set of cards affecting the other no matter what I'm doing, it seems like.
Right. I actually wouldn't describe it as a feedback loop because generally it's I'm because if you say I use my sweep to buff this and now this buffs my sweep, wait a minute, I have one sweep
Sweep
left.
sweep is gone. I
Yeah,
see.
it's actually an indefinite tension. It means that you'll want to consider every card fairly individually. These are all tools and they are important tools, but your normals define your neutral, which means based on the opponent you're up against and what their boost kit looks like and what ranges they prefer to stand at, you will value your normal boosts slightly differently. In almost all cases, you will need to have sweep and focus as attacks because they are extremely valuable attacks. But in some cases, you might decide that having light available is great. I don't think anybody would disagree that having light available is great, but sometimes having +1 power on all of these can make the difference between stunning something and not stunning something.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, I,
so let
I,
me,
I didn't I didn't
Mhm.
consider the value of the boost when you were talking a second ago because I was starting to kind of get ahead of myself and thinking, well, all right, I can put block in as a transform every time because
Okay.
I don't care about hitting
Mhm.
that. Oh, but what if I need parry? And
Yep.
only having one copy of parry in seventh cross, especially, is a dangerous proposition. So in Exceed, everybody is making these resource decisions all the time. Am I playing this as an attack? Am I boosting it? Am I spending it as force? That's the game. But Tournelouse has this added 2 or 3 different ways that he can play with those resources that kind
Mhm.
of it's like it resists being solved. It
Right.
resists this defined line of play.
Yeah. It takes the normals and says, okay, you were playing attack boost force, and now you're playing attack boost force transformation.
Yeah,
You have added another component to the game that you were already trying to solve.
interesting.
And that's yeah. So that actually means that it's going to be easier to talk about these cards, in that these cards are specific tools that do important things and are relatively linear in their purpose. But every game of tourney that I play, I find to be more interesting than just I'm going to do all these things and we'll talk about that later.
Okay,
Become this unstoppable monster because every game I'm figuring out how to wield my normals kit to its fullest,
so
and I
it
do a
really
very
is.
good job with that.
My game plan is going to be very hand reliant. Then it sounds like
Yep.
based on what I get, I'm going to have to be very reactive in the moment with this character.
Yep, because you're to be blunt, your neutral sucks. Your neutral is in a set of good neutral boost, and that's it. And you
Right.
only have 2 copies of each. And you if you sacrifice one way, then like it's hard to imagine a character with only normals. I have in fact played games of Exceed where we were trying to see what would happen if you played a character with only normals. Don't do it, by the way. It's not fun.
I,
Um, it it functions. It demonstrates the engine. Uh, but when you're playing with 16 cards, 2 copies of 8 normals, and you drop the second sweep, your opponent goes, "No, no more sweeps. I'm safe.
yeah,
The
I
world
can
is looking
finally
beautiful."
Yeah, and suddenly my mid speeds are way less valuable.
Hmm.
I'm just going to play on curve all day.
Exactly. Um,
Interesting.
and Tourney very much feels that. So let's talk redundancy. In order to feel like it's remotely sane to ever transform focus and sweep, you better have something that is focus or sweep like. You have two ways to get one. Now I'm going to go into the kit.
Okay.
We'll talk about the ultras last because they are very distinctly different in what they do. They actually are engine cards.
Okay.
These are seventh cross cards. Um,
Actually, D,
these,
before we get into
yeah,
the actual kit, really quick, just a rules clarification question. It would not be sane to do it, but is EX transforming sweep rules legal? Can I do that?
yes,
Okay.
in front side, yes.
Okay.
The and I have in fact EX transform block because block's never going to hit. You have to either EX transform it or put it into play with an effect. Although usually I find that I miss the parry.
Right, right. Yeah, the exact example that we just gave. Okay, so I need to hit. They work like regular transforms. They're not special in that way. They just don't have the black text and white background.
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
interesting.
They have and they still have the boost as well, where it's you can play the boost instead of transforming them.
Right.
Which is
There's a third. There's just a third use printed on, but it's printed on the character card instead.
yeah,
It's like critical text being on a character card in Street Fighter, for example.
right. Yeah.
Okay, that tracks. All right. Sorry for the interruption. Please tell me
No,
about the
you're
kit.
fine. All right. So I started by saying we need something that is focus or sweep like if we're ever going to transform these at all. There's not a lot of printed guard here. There's one card printed guard. It's only 4, but it is speed 3, which actually is reasonable. Maybe not comfortable, but reasonable. Um, as a sweep like, 1 power does not really scream value, but it generates an extra gauge. And it does say ignore guard on it, which means that this is not just our sweep, it is also our spike.
It's also a spike, and honestly, its stat line, other than the power, other than the range, looks fairly comparable to spike. We've got an out to 3. We've got 3 speed. We've got 4 guard, and we've got
Hmm.
ignore guard on it.
Yep. So
Okay.
if you discount the actual amount of life your opponent is losing, uh, this is about as rewarding as sweep and more rewarding than spike in a lot of cases because you're getting a gauge off of this, which means that you are getting a resource which, if you are transforming things, is quite precious because you are not building gauge. You know,
You're not getting engaged normally. You're limiting your ability to play neutral or afford your ultras or anything like that.
yep. So building extra gauge is fantastic. 1 power is often not enough to stun the stuff that you're most afraid of. It doesn't stun EX sweep, it doesn't stun focus. But this is where you can go, okay, well if I want to have a scary lightning spike, then which normals am I willing to sacrifice? And in the mid game, you will probably have a 3 power lightning spike, which is good enough to stun anything that matters asterisk. Um,
Anything among the normals, or even with the exception of
EX
EX
focus.
focus or something, sure. But
Yeah,
by default, a lightning spike is incapable of stunning any EX stack at all. Correct.
yeah, that's
Okay.
correct.
Okay. And now
Um,
I did
yeah.
hear you say, you know, exempting the actual damage that you're doing. This has about as much upside as Sweeper Spike does. The amount of damage that I'm doing is a pretty big reason why I like to play Sweep D. And I feel
Mhm.
like I know how much you like sevens and eights. 6 is also a pretty high power number. 1 is less so. Should I be treating this as an engine component or as a resource builder or just as a fairly sane defensive option in a kit that doesn't seem to have any?
Um, well, the answer is yes.
Okay.
Um, my take on how tourney works, and again, this is something that people are free to disagree with. Um, you can read your ability and say, okay, I can have +8 power on all of my specials and ultras. This could be 9 power. That's
Sure.
that's 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 ridiculous. Heck, it could, with that one ultra transformation, it could be even higher. I have this stat line over here. We'll talk about this card in a minute, but like 1 to 3, 8, 7 is one of the dumbest stat lines you can imagine. Like, holy cow, that's
Yeah,
nuts.
there are Red Horizon Ultras that wish they were that good.
Sounds great. And all I have to do is hit with 8 normals. What is
Right. The
the
game's over now.
I was about to say, what's the average power of a normal?
Right, yeah. I think if you hit with every normal once, I think you do exactly 30 damage, which is enough to kill a character. So like
That is correct. Yes.
ignoring occasionally I have guard, occasionally I have armor rather. This is that's not like there's not enough life in a game outside of unless I'm fighting Ragna or somebody. The game's just not going to last long enough for me to get this this up to an 8 or 9 power attack.
Right.
Okay.
So that's what it looks like he wants to do. That's what the
Yeah.
apparent seventh cross fantasy is that I'm going to transform all of my cards. I'm going to have 15 transformations, and then my remaining 15 cards are awesome. But if you actually get to that point and the game isn't over, something has gone horribly wrong.
Your opponent is collaborating with you to make
Yes.
this happen at this point, right?
Yes. They
Okay.
are in fact trying to assemble a Jin Rummy hands or something. Like I don't know
Sure.
what they're doing, but they're not really trying to kill you because that implies that you've had time to like draw EXs, transform them by discarding them. If strikes are happening and the characters are engaging with each other, the game will end before you actually achieve the same game.
Sure.
Um, so I don't think it's so I think generally the way I look at his specials is not this is your big dumb payouts after you've played a bunch of boring normals. I think these are your interesting utility cards which provide some useful benefits in their attack shapes and then do something that changes the shape of your normals in some very slight but important way.
Okay.
This is one of the two most utility oriented ones. So this is an ignore guard. It hits at range 1, which is not a thing among the normals.
Sure.
Builds a little bit of resources. Can itself go to gauge. Of course, you don't have to transform it. The transformation gives your normals an after effect that lets you pay force to retreat, which means it turns grasp into hit, push or pull 1 or 2 after you may spend a force to retreat 1, which means it can, for example, beat sweep.
Sure.
At
Yeah.
range 1
You set
or
range
permit.
4 on your after at speed 7.
Yep. It also means you can, dive over an opponent to hit them at range 1 and then jump back out of the corner.
Okay. Yep.
Or gain it. Wrong card. Or gain advantage and then look at the board and look at their hand and go, okay, well, my follow up would prefer range 2, so I will just do that then.
This is
Mhm.
also having had a guide or an interview sometime in the mists of time about chip. After is not a hit. If
Mhm.
I'm being if I'm that works less well with just retreat effects now that I say it out loud. I was going to say that if you wanted to, you could um chip can get in on a zoner by whiffing with grasp at range and dodging a projectile. But if I'm
Mhm.
only retreating, that's probably not really a feasible thing.
Yeah, that's about limited to if you're at range 3, you can maybe play a grasp that dodges a sweep or an assault or whatever. Not usually valuable for Tournelouse, but if you're certain you know what it is, discarding 2 cards to not get hit by sweep is better than getting hit by sweep getting a random card.
Sure.
Um, so like the use case is there, but Tourney is not a ranged character, as will
Okay.
be extremely obvious as we go through this kit.
Makes sense.
Um,
And when going back to the power numbers for a second, you said that 8 or 9 is obviously out of the realm of possibility. I believe you said that this could hit for 3, and that would be enough to
mhm.
stun focus. Is that reasonable? Is that a more realistic game plan that I should be expecting to see for Tournelouse, having transformed 2 normals over the course of a game instead of 8 or 9?
In fact, you should expect that this will hit for 3 when you want it to hit for 3, and not only for that reason. Um, so I will jump right to it, as you probably saw the little eyeball pop. Um, Tournelouse can hit with +2 power nearly at will in the late
Ah,
game.
okay,
Steal a transformation, now my attack has +2 power or +2 armor.
okay, okay,
Um, which means that if you have transformation, you're burning them, sealing them. You don't have any way to get them back at that point. They're gone forever. However, +2 power for the next few strikes means the game is over and my opponent is dead. +2 armor for the next few strikes, which, by the way, when you set your attack is not when you initiate, and it's not as an action. It means that the opponent can strike you, and you can say, actually, I have +2 armor now. You
right.
didn't stun me with your, 9 power attack, Soul. You're just going to die.
You're burning out the engine that you've been constructing in exchange for a burst of power in the short term.
Yep.
Okay,
So generally, if you want this to hit for 3, it will.
it will. Okay, so it's less that three is a realistic number of transforms, or two is a realistic numbers of normals to have transformed, and more that you just have a way to do it when you want to do it. Um, I think we're. I'm now. I'm curious about the Bargeist, so I'm gonna ask a question about it. When you have a transformation that has written on it your normal has +1 power, and you seal that transformation for +2 power, you've given yourself effectively +1 power, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So maybe the math doesn't always work out when you're doing this
Well,
with normals.
one moment. One moment. Yeah, yeah. So say you don't have to seal a normal transformation.
Right. It's any transformation.
Yeah, you can seal one of these and then
Okay.
keep your normals, and now you have whatever numbers you wanted.
Sure. Now this sweep hits for 8. And
Mm.
all I had to get rid of was one of these.
Yep.
Okay.
But yes, I'll talk about Bargeist in detail last because I think it really is where you decide I'm ready to burn myself out and burn my opponent out faster. It is your ideal late game pressure state. But that means I really should talk about it last because you're gonna have a hard enough time getting to the point where you're comfortable doing it. Because your neutral is your normals. You have nothing over here that really is neutral oriented, except that your attack shapes provide themselves useful utility.
Sure.
Like it does matter in neutral that you have a range 1 spike, because it means that your opponent is less comfortable going to range 1, is less comfortable investing in high reward attacks that are low speed, like sweep, at range 1. And depending on what range your opponent preferred, they may decide that they would prefer to go out to a range where they can beat this with dive or some other attack that they have in their specials kit. That then you could call out with a different tool.
So this is, despite it, we frequently talk about neutral and exceed being existing among boosts and spending force for movement and things like that. The existence of a threatening attack or a threatening defensive option or just a thing that your opponent has to worry about is going to impact how they play. That is also neutral.
Yeah, it shapes it, right?
Okay.
There's a reason that we say if Zangief's at range 1 with 1 gauge, you're not in neutral,
No, yeah,
right?
he's
You're
winning.
in pressure.
Yeah, you're in
He's
the
winning.
vortex at that point. You need to leave.
Yeah, yeah. Which means that neutral at range 3 is defined in a lot of ways by Geef's identity and by his kit, where you go, well, at range 3 we might be at neutral, depending on whose turn it is, but
Sure.
at range 1 we're not, which means my options are more limited. And if Geef is standing at range 3 and I'm cornered, I'm using it. Yeah, I should be using more examples about this character, but if you're cornered at range 3, then your options to get farther away are extremely limited because you can't just move 3 and get to a range greater than 3. You have to fly across the whole board.
Right.
And the extent to which your opponent pressures that board state, like, shapes your neutral, even though that the pressure itself is something that is extremely character dependent.
Right. Sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
neutral is a state where both players are jockeying for an advantage, and who is that advantage is determined a lot by board state and by the threats that you have. So that's why neutral is shaped by your kit.
Right. That makes sense. So, and to return to the point that you were making initially, this is not a haymaker. It's not a late game payout. It is a utility card that I am going to use when I need a range 1 spike that hits for 1. Because I
Yep.
don't have a range 1 spike that hits for 7 like Zangief does.
Mm-hmm.
But it's what I have, and it for the purposes that I'm using a range 1 spike for, which is not necessarily hitting for 7 or 8. Sometimes it's keeping my opponent from playing sweep at range 1. This does the job just fine.
Exactly.
Okay.
I would. I'm not hitting for 6, but if I get what I want out of this card, then I'm taking 6 less damage. And I sure would play a card that had 1 power and 6 armor if I needed the armor, right?
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. So it is a utility card that I'm looking to leverage when I need that utility. And it sounds like the transformation on it is not something that I want so badly that I'm going to um we talk about holding a spike over the opponent's head all game or holding a command grab over the opponent's head all game to enforce how they play.
Mm-hmm.
There is a tension between doing that and EX transforming this or something like that. It sounds like this might be more valuable to just hold as a threat. And if I land one, I get the transformation, and that's cool.
Yeah. If you so generalizations are always wrong. Never EX
Always.
transform this card.
Okay.
Um, that is a horrible waste, and it's your least valuable transformation. Arguably your second least valuable. We'll come back to that. This transformation is useful, but as I mentioned, like this is not a character who actually wants to be at range. His range 5 tools are non-existent. He only exists at 4.
Okay.
He's perfectly fine at 1 through 4.
Okay. I
But
also I can't help but notice that that's the range that the normals cap out at as well.
yeah, weird. Yeah, this man who has spiky knuckles is punching you with normal attacks a lot.
Interested in
Um,
brawling. Okay, that makes sense.
yep. But yeah, so like this transformation is useful, and that's why I tried to frame it as the way that you use the transformation effectively is to set up follow-ups. It's not to leave to create option selects where you can be safe. It's to look at the current strike and go, am I better off exactly one space farther away for the next strike?
I can
Right?
do that
Like
if I need to. Okay.
yes, you respond to Zangief for another, going back to him as an easy example of somebody who loves range 1, and he comes in with assault, he has advantage, you play focus. A lot of people would actually kind of have lost that strike because even though focus is really good, takes way less damage, draws you a card, it's Zangief's turn and he's at range 1. If you're Tournelouse and you're not cornered, it's Zangief's turn, but you're not at range 1.
Right. Okay. And it doesn't have to be that dramatic of a use of an example to be a good use case for this transformation, but you're looking for something like that. You're not just
Yeah,
doing it to back up. You're doing it if you have a hand that is exactly spike and you're at range 1 and you need to be at range 2.
yeah. You're not doing this because it's a good idea to do this. You're doing this because you have a reason you want exactly this.
Yep. All right, that makes sense.
Yep. So both the attack and the transformation are tools. The attack I find so valuable that I will often not even transform this if I land it.
Okay.
The main reason I transform this if I land it is because then it's a transform that I'm willing to sacrifice on my exceed ability.
Got it.
Uh,
Okay, because it's not particularly valuable. So maybe this transformation actually reads later in the game +2 power, +2 armor, or +2 armor.
yeah, like a once per game +2 power is still something that can be pretty potent used at the right time. So I'll still
Okay.
consider it.
So,
Um,
and the rationale for not transforming it is now it goes to gauge. Later in the game, I'll be able to spend gauge in neutral for changing cards or moving. Now it's in my discard pile. I'll reshuffle. I'll get it back again. Is that correct?
exactly.
Got it.
Yeah. So
Okay.
if
Okay.
I have exceeded, then I would transform without hesitation.
Got it.
Did I say exceed? I meant reshuffle. If I have reshuffle.
Yes. Yeah, that makes sense. So if you no longer have the ability to get more of them out of your gauge,
Yeah.
um,
Then
you're
go ahead
you're,
and transform it
you're
because
having to
now it's
transform it.
fuel.
Sure.
Um, fuel and sometimes a tool, but mostly fuel. Gauge is good, but gauge is very often forced for you. By design. You have a 0 gauge exceed, and we'll talk about them later. But your ultras don't cost gauge either. They should. We'll talk about that later. Anyway.
Okay. And you're
Um,
not using gauge to pay for any force costs on your boosts because you don't have those.
Notably, yes.
Right. Okay. So you're moving, you're changing cards. That's what your gauge is probably for.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. So we have your sweep spike, which does the job of I have some guard, which I meant to mention. Yeah, you also have 4 guard on speed 3. It's not the best, but it might be what you need sometimes if you have literally no other options. And it does the job of spike in a lot of cases, just with wildly different looking rewards.
Right.
Um, all right, we're gonna cover that one later. Here's another nice little tool, Southpaw. This is a 1/2/1/6
It's
with after advance 4.
kind of cross. It's like a cross that actually crosses up.
Yep, it's a cross up. That's correct.
Okay.
There is a mirrored shape in a different character's kit. Did you have a Zolt's talk yet? I don't remember.
I have not had a Zolt talk yet.
Yeah. For it is no coincidence. Zolt's and Tournelouse have mirrored kits in a lot of ways. But
No,
it cross up.
Zolt has Fatal Eye, doesn't he?
You're correct. Because that is Tourney's other eye.
There's lore stuff. D. Oh
So
no.
good. It's
Okay,
so good.
so I remember reading, I think probably your document about Seventh Cross lore. Tournelouse is a demon. He's a demon
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
Zolt took his eye.
Yes.
Oh, that's so cool.
Depending on, I do not actually remember what the canon is as to whether there was any amount of voluntary. I think Zolt's tore it out. I do not think that Tourney at all consented. I believe Tourney is allied with Minato and not at all with Zolt.
Sure. Yeah, it doesn't strike me that these two would be friends. But oh man,
Yeah.
I never put together the cross up in Southpaw. That's so cool. They've got mirrored ish art. That's very neat. Okay, so
Yep.
So I'm using Southpaw, I assume just from the stat line, where I would use cross, but when I'm cornered instead of when I have room to back up.
Exactly, it's room to advance instead of room to retreat.
Okay.
It also has the reverse use of cross, where zoners will use cross to leave melee range. You're not a zoner. Against zoners, you can use Southpaw to get in against projectiles that are slower than
Oh,
speed 6,
okay.
which is most of them. So this is an
Okay.
after, not a hit.
So whenever we talk about super melee characters, it's always like, don't play cross because you need run to move you in.
Hmm.
I'm a melee character. I have a copy of cross that I can use as run
Hmm.
to get in, and I have a copy of cross-ish that I can use to get in.
Yep, and also that means that if you boosted run, you still have speed 6 on deck.
Yeah. Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
Yep, which is pretty useful. Now it is definitely higher value to hit this because the hit effects, letting you transform a card from hands, tends to be okay. You are, if you had any engine building to do at all, unless your hand was comprised entirely of cards that you did not want to put in your transformation area, that effect is strict upside. Right? Like, well, it is always strict upside, but it could be not. It could be neutral if you have nothing, if you have no hand, for example.
Right.
But most of the time, you're going to be like, okay, yeah, I had at least one card in this hand that I think is worth transforming, for later or for the near future. Notably, if you transform a normal, that gives you +1 power right away.
Right.
Um, but you don't have to. It might be that this is the moment that you decide you're going to throw one of your other special transformations into play because you're about to hit somebody with a normal and you want it to be stronger.
Sure.
Um,
Okay. And I mean, when we were talking about Lightning Spike, its value proposition compared to Sweeper Spike, I was saying that, well, 1 damage versus 6 or 5 damage, that seems skewed in one direction here. When I'm playing cross, I often do not care about how much damage I'm hitting for.
mhm.
Like having a 1 damage cross or a cross like that actually preserves quite a bit of the value of what
Yep,
I'm probably playing the attack for.
yep, that's absolutely correct.
Okay.
And it's not. It will easily be 2 if you want it to be. It will easily be 3 by the mid game. Like I said, if we can expect this to see 3, then we can expect this to see 3 if you want it to. Although it's less importance because you don't. That's not the value of the card. It just incidentally might
Right.
might be doing that.
I do need to deal damage to my opponent at some point to kill them.
Yeah, eventually they gotta die.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
eventually. Yeah. As a well, I'll talk about Vargas more later. So, um, generalizations are always wrong.
Always.
Um, never EX transform this card.
Okay.
Um, because why aren't you just EX attacking with it? Like, you don't need to EX attack with it. I just love EX attacks. I'm addicted to them.
Yeah.
But if you want to throw away 2 copies of this, I would sooner say actually +1 power, +1 armor is good enough, even if I'm trading, to make it worth playing a real strike with this, because now I'm going to get 2 transformations instead of 1, and my trade is mitigated by the EX value.
Right. Because
Um,
if you EX transform this, you're losing your hit effect. You're losing the advance that you're probably really using the card for in the first place.
right. If you're in a position where this card, unless your opponent is literally cornered, in which case you might still be able to make use of it, depending on what their kit looks like, if they have a bunch of lower speed or no guard options.
Sure.
But if your opponent is cornered, then it's pretty questionable to use the stack. But if you, for example, range 1, you're in the corner, EX Southpaw is just like playing EX Cross from the other side. You are getting out of there on
Yeah.
curve.
Yeah. Almost unstoppably. You're getting out of the corner and getting a transform in the 2 transforms in the process.
Yep. So it's great attack. I have transforms this from hand before because it turns out sometimes you just need that 1 more power on normals. Um, by the way, this is the one that really makes the thing you were describing earlier obvious.
Yeah.
Where, oh look, it's plus, because now it mirrors the normals, where if you seal a normal for +2 power, but you're playing a special and you actually only got +1. If you seal this for
Right.
+2
Yeah.
power, but you're
You've
playing normal,
lost
you only
one
got
to gain
+1.
2. Sure.
Yep, which means that if you do transform this, it will almost always be one of the last, if not the last, things that you get rid of. You will probably have this for the rest of the game because +1 power is good, and you're not likely to be sealing it for a better value than that.
Sure.
Well,
Okay.
notably
So
better value.
+1 power on normals. I mean, breakpoints on their own. Now my sweep breaks counter sweeps, which is cool. But everything else is going to be just like slightly better trades than I would normally be getting, or a little bit more value. Unless I also have +2 power from this, or
Yep.
from this. So I can
Yep.
make some pretty breakpoint shattering attacks much more easily if I
Yep.
have +1 power on my normals. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
I love EX assaults, but even a regular assault as Tournelouse can do 7 damage, and now you have advantage, and at range 1, and probably now you play a 6 power grasp, like just kill them. Um,
Okay.
like you're that's 13 damage in 2 strikes if you're in exceed mode and you have 2 transforms to burn, and you have this separate from those 2 transforms. Like
Okay.
that's basically half of someone's life.
Yeah, and
Um,
because most of the value that we're talking about is coming, I mean, everything that all the numbers that we just said are coming from an interaction between this and this.
Mhm.
My ability to like that 6 power grasp, it could be more because I might have hit with a couple of um oh wait, no, never mind. Sorry.
yeah, no, these are using their power values,
Their actual
and they
power
might
values.
have
Got it.
they
Okay.
might have this, they might have this. This is only for your specials, yeah.
For your specials and ultras. All right. Ignore everything I said.
Specials.
There's a reason that D's the expert here.
Yeah, it's easy to miss. I mean, it's like, oh, well, I have plus power on everything, and then you play a card and realize you didn't have plus power on it.
Right, for
Um,
once.
yep. But yeah, the tell is like, okay, if you had no power to begin with because your power was literally 0 or 1 or 2, then it's the thing that gets the bonuses from normals.
Right, right. Sure.
Yep.
I can look at these and be like, why would I ever play this card? Oh, they might have a lot of power.
Yeah, like there might be a reason to play it.
Yep.
Um, Yeah. So Southpaw's fantastic. Defensive tool, utility button in a lot of ways, but also so safe, so reliable. I mean, it's Cross, right? It's reliable for all the reasons Cross is reliable, and Cross is extremely reliable.
Sure.
Um, just in a different board states, and this one will give you an extra transformation instead of dealing a little more damage, and that's completely fine.
You
Um,
mentioned when we were talking about Lightning Spike that you will often let it go to gauge just so you can get it back again later on.
mm,
Southpaw, you're talking about in pretty glowing terms, but also I can see a lot more obvious use case out of this boost than I could out of this one. Is this
yeah,
one usually just going to be transformed when I hit it?
usually.
Okay.
I have on at least one occasion, Wild Swing of Southpaw hit, transform the other Southpaw from hands.
Oh,
And then keep that first one in my gauge so that I know I still have a southpaw for after each shuffle, because I'm like, all right, this transformation is providing a lot of value. Of course, if I had them both in hand, I just put a VX attack, like I said. But
right.
this transformation is great. It is adding power to all the things you were planning on using to kill the opponent in any way. At least that's, again, I think Tourney is very normals oriented, both in his boosts and also in late game attacks. So yeah, I really like Diabolic Might. Depending on the opponent, if you find you're up against somebody who's actually able to keep you out consistently and you need this to get in, it's acceptable to keep it around. Or somebody
If you're
who's
up if
spectacularly
you're up
speed
against
sensitive.
the new 13s or the phonons of the world and you just need movement.
Yeah, like movement in a strike in particular is like this is moving 4 spaces within a strike. Most people do not do that,
Sure,
so it
at
is.
speed 6. That's
Yep,
that's honestly that's really strong utility.
yep. And if that's the thing you need in the matchup, then keep it around. But in most cases, I would prefer transform it to keep transformed
Yep, makes sense.
for the end of the game. All right. Conversely, doo-doo. All right. So this is our grasp replacement, right? So it should look a lot like grasp. Um, Wait a minute.
Yeah, there's some key differences.
Yeah.
I can't
So
help but notice.
this is not just a range 1 tool. This is actually a range 1 at 3 tool.
With advantage.
Um,
It's like it's an assault
and
grasp.
provides advantage. It's kind of an assault grasp. Doesn't give any movement, and also has no printed damage. This
Yeah.
attack does almost literally nothing unless you have a power boost in play or at least one normal transforms.
Okay.
This is one of the few real handicaps of playing Tourney. Like it's you don't have special boosts, and you have a special that is actually dead until you get something else into play.
Right, because
Um,
because this can't stun anything at 0 power. You brought out Fatal Eye a second ago. 1 actually is a lot more power than 0.
hmm Yeah,
Okay.
one breaks 0 guard and 0 does not, as it turns
Yeah,
out.
so if this had 1 more power, it would be an incredible defensive option. You get to say no to on curve attacks at range 2 or at range 3, no problem. Zero power is actually a serious detriment.
Yep, pretty much useless.
Okay.
If we had a super high transformation, then we might still say, well, okay, I gain advantage and I have this transformation in play. Is that Is that worth playing a 0 power attack and eating whatever my opponent throws in response?
Right.
Well, for one thing, no, because if your opponent responds with an on-curve button at range 3, they will steal advantage back from you, so don't do that.
Right.
And 2, this transformation is your... Well, when I said earlier that I think you have like this is like your second or third worst, this is one of the other three. Normal set +2 guard is not going to look good at all until we get to the next transformation, because +2 guard does not matter for any breakpoints among any normals.
Yeah, the lowest damage that a normal does is 3.
Yep. And the normal, well, okay, I am slightly lying. Excuse me. If your opponent plays dive at range 4, then your sweep will no longer be stunned. That exact use case, I guess. Not usually the one that I'm thinking about the most. So in return for +2 guard, which mostly matters if I have EX attacks or if I have +2 armor, which
Plus 2
then it
armor.
actually starts to look like it matters a lot more.
Sure.
Is not doing a lot for me most of the time. So for me, at least, this is unfailingly a card that goes to gauge. Until I've reshuffled, at which point it will probably be transformed because I need to burn it. And I'm perfectly willing to throw that away and turn it into +2 armor or turn it into +2 power.
Okay, so it's fodder. It's a transform that you're okay sacrificing to this big angry dog.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Not for its own use.
So with a couple of even with one normal hit uh over the course of the game, this having 1 power increases its defensive utility quite a bit, to the point where
Yes,
it
now
actually
it's a
seems like
card.
now it seems like a fairly usable card. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I know that eye shapes are fairly notorious in
Mm-hmm.
early Exceed. I know that I haven't had a lesson on Zolt, but I know him by reputation. I know Alice has a pretty nasty eye. I'm
Yep.
assuming that the reason that eyes are so fearsome in early Exceed is not because of this card.
It is not.
Okay.
This is, however, what probably Tourney's most infamous special. I'm not sure it actually deserves to be for a reason I'll come to later, but it is speed 7, range 1 of 3. The power in mini games will get up to 5 someday, somehow, and that starts to look pretty dumb.
Yeah,
Where
one to
you go,
three five
well,
seven. I mean 1 to 3 8 7. You said earlier that's terrifying. 1 to 3 5 7 is still pretty good.
that's plenty. You put Fierce into play and look at your opponent at range 2 or 3 and go, I'm going to hit you. This Fierce is damage. Your life has been
Yeah,
reduced by 2.
I hope
You
you
can't
have
stop it.
EX Cross in your hand and you're initiating with it right
Yes. Yep. So it is a solid card. It's a card that only tends to be crazy in Tourney's late game when he has sometimes better things to do. Although it is an important part of a very specific late game mix-up. Well, it's not that specific, honestly. The important part of the mix-up is what you just described, is that you can initiate with this, and if they try to cross out of your slower card, their cross is done, and now they don't have cross, and now it's your turn again, so play your slower card and they die.
now. Right.
Um,
Sure. So there's late game utility. This sounds like a card that I'm mulliganing away every time I see it, because
Agree. Yes.
I'm not getting anything out of hitting with it in the early game. It's not a good defensive option in the early game. It needs support, and it's also not a very good engine component. Correct?
Correct, and it's also a great wild swing.
Oh, sure. Okay. Yeah.
Like
Got it.
it's not on, or sorry, defending on curve at range 1. If that's the thing you need, this does the job. It's not grasp. It doesn't move the opponents. That if that's important, then oh well. But it hits. And if you wild swing it by the time you've gotten some support in play, then okay, you've done something with your life.
Okay.
And if they tried to play a cross or an assault, then you can catch them. Like this is great. You only have one special that is really non-functional at ranges 1 and 2. So being in that range is your life, like 1 to 3 especially,
I'll be
and
wild swinging
this works at all
occasionally
those
anyway,
ranges.
and this is a pretty good one to get.
Yep.
Okay. I also, skipping ahead slightly, putting Lightning Spike aside, 7, 6, 5, and 4 for, and I'm seeing that this is a 3 to 4 card. Tourney is fast.
Yes. Yes, he
Tourney
is.
Tourney is breaking the speed curve on curve.
Above
He's
curve,
got.
by the way.
Oh yeah,
You haven't
that's a
read it
wow.
yet, but
That's
it's
a
above
that's
curve.
a that's a range 4 card. Wow. Okay, so
Yep.
he's very quick.
Yes.
Um, so again, I can see kind of the fantasy here is that all of these on curve attacks have 8 power, and suddenly I'm confirming all of these crazy damage numbers without my opponent being able to do anything. Without that being a realistic plan, I'm left with some really, really fast options that also have some cool utility to them that are probably going to hit for some damage over the course of the game, but that's not what I'm doing the damage for.
Mm.
Um, when I'm set up in the late game, these don't really change in utility by becoming haymakers or anything like that. They're still utility cards or they're still fodder. I'm not really I'm not looking at this and saying 1 to 3 at speed 7. Oh my god, I could staple so much power to this because I don't have the boosts for it.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean you can, but as I said, in my opinion, the reason you play this in the late game is because it's one half of your mix up or one third of your mix up, depending respective. And if they answer it wrong, then your next attack will just kill them.
Got it.
Like you have an extra multiple extra actually, but in particular, at 1 of 3 your favorite range, you have 2 very reliable buttons. One of them is assault. That will gain you advantage. If your opponent blocks the wrong thing, we will not talk about this in detail right now, but if they block the wrong thing, the next turn they die.
Uh, D, I found a larger power number than 1 or 0.
You're correct. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, let's
We'll come
it's
back to that.
almost Christmas. We can wait a little bit longer for our presents. But I
Yes.
did just see a double digit number and a double digit red number, and I'm very excited now.
Yes. Um, yeah. So the fantasy of making all of these 9 power is not even really relevant for the reason I described before. Like you hit with all the normals, cool. You've killed your opponent. But there's also the fact that by the time you get to late game, Tourney has essentially an Astral Heats. But
Mm,
like I said, we'll come back to that.
got it.
So
Okay.
this transformation looks a lot better. Um,
Sure.
3 is a lot more than 2, deceptively, right? Because 3 now covers Grasp and Cross and a fair number of special pokes as well. Um, I I still don't care enough to throw away my copy of Evil Eye, let alone my copy of Death Omen, because let's review Death Omen now, because this is, I think, his best special. I think this is more notable than Evil Eye. I think it's more notable than Southpaw. I think it's more notable than Lightning Spike. Uh, does not have any of those interesting utility properties, except that it's above cover range 4. But it does do real damage, and it does it very quickly in a somewhat deceptive fashion.
Oh,
But
because so this one
mhm,
of these you may transform a card from your hand. That could be a normal. Now it's doing
mhm.
2. I seal a transformation on hit.
I seal a
It
special
can,
or ultra,
right now it's doing
and I get the full
5
+3. Yep.
on
And if
above
I'm
curve
in Exceed
5
mode,
damage. Oh wow.
yeah, it's
Okay.
7.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, it's it costs what you'd expect, right? This is kind of a 2 gauge ultra. You're like, all right, I hit for 7 power at range 4 by sealing 2 transformations. Although one of them you option select through, one of them is on set if you're in Exceed mode. And one of those you can actually get into play with the before effect. But it's like, all right, if I think of my transformations as gauge, which they're not strictly, but then it's like I'm playing a 2 gauge ultra at a discount because I can pay 1 card from hand. Um,
Sure.
and 1 to 4, 7, 5 is the
That
lowest this usually
yeah,
does
that's
in
not a
my
2 gauge
experience.
ultra. That's somewhat more than that, I think.
Yep. Yeah, early game this will often only hit for, well, you have a choice, right? You don't have to seal something. If you look at this and you go, oh, my opponent played a dive, they're stunned. I don't need to do the extra damage. Save it for
Right.
later.
Right.
Um, but this is an excellent way to murder people in the late game, and in particular, my love of EX Assault is well documented. My love of EX Death Omen shall now be documented because EX Death Omen in Exceed mode, that is your haymaker. That's how you kill people. 13 power ultra is nice. 8 to 10 power special, also a fan.
That's still pretty good. Yeah. So when you're talking about you better block the right thing because I've got evil eye, I've got assault, and I'm going to gain advantage on you. And if you pick wrong, you're taking a lot of damage. This is where the damage is coming from.
Yep, yep. Like even without looking at that 13 power that we flipped a little bit ago, this is hitting stupid numbers because
Okay.
it does not take very many transformations and you might get one for free depending on what the life totals are at. Which, by the way, if you have less life than the opponent, if we have traded at all, how do you think our life totals compare?
Sure. Yeah, I'm not doing enough damage to have a life overage on you unless I'm only hitting with normals.
Yep. Which means that this effect is actually not really if you're losing, it's just if you're playing normally and not stomping over the opponent.
Right. If it's not literally the first turn of the game.
Yep. Yeah, if tourney has a life lead, and it's and life totals are above, oh, I don't know, 10, you kind of go, oh, well, the opponent is losing.
Right.
Like,
I'm winning definitively at this point. Okay.
he
So
is not expected to get a life lead until he kills you.
it sounds like this is another one for different reasons in Evil Eye, but I'm not really looking to have this card in the very early game either. This is my late game Haymaker card. It loses a lot of utility in the early game when I'm not set up. Um,
Mm.
and again, the transformation is not so valuable that I'm digging for it. So this is another one that I'm quite happy to see late. It sounds like.
Yeah, I to me this is more often a thing that I want to have around a mid game, because EX Death Omen, sometimes just one Death Omen, depends on the matchup, but EX Death Omen is something that I can initiate with against a lot of people, and depending on the number of transformations I have in play and how my setup is at this time, I can option select it into beating a sweep, and if it doesn't, then I don't.
Sure.
Um, and I can say, okay, I have 2 transform normals, I have less life than the opponent. Cool. Play a Death Omen, I probably don't lose the strike. And if we
So
started at not range 2 and they play cross, I probably still win that strike because I get a free transform from hand. So I don't win it by very much, but you know.
if I'm option selecting in order to beat a sweep, that means that the threshold that I want to potentially be able to hit is 7. So
Yes.
if I've gotten far enough into the game that this is hitting for 4, or really for 3 because it's before effect, um, is it could let me scoot that damage up a
Yeah, yeah.
tiny bit
Yeah,
more.
you can think of it as the before effect gives you the hit effect. You don't like just to if you're counting your transformations,
Right.
then if you have anything in hand that is not transformed already, you can just pretend that you can do the numbers as if the before and hit are just +3 power. Like you can
Right.
just not worry about that.
Together they are. So I'm looking to start considering this as an option that can beat sweep when I have 2 to 3, probably 3 normal transformations in play.
Yep.
Okay, makes sense. And
Yep.
we
Which
would
for
call that around the mid game. That makes sense.
Yeah, for me that's squarely mid game. I've hit with 3 normals. I've decided that they are normals that I'm willing to sacrifice for the rest of the game. Chances are that means that I hit with a cross, because this, not to repeat what we said before, but this is an attack that I don't intend to play very much because I'm not somebody who wants to go far away from the opponent.
Right.
It is a boost I value, but I have an attack that does that job too, so I'm pretty willing to sacrifice cross in a lot of matchups.
Right. So
Uh,
cross is down now. You're able, or cross is in transform now. Maybe a couple
yep,
other ones too. This has
yep,
become a real uh
yep.
a real button.
And notably, if I hit with cross, uh, I most likely have gone to range 4 or
4 to
5.
5. Right.
Hopefully only 4, which is where that Omen sweet spot is.
Right.
So I consider this kind of a natural combo, a natural follow up where it's like, okay, well, got a normal in my transform area, left still didn't deal much damage, so I still have a life deficit, and I got one more transform, so now I probably have a 7 power Death Omen on top. And if they play a focus or sorry, if they play anything other than sweep, I probably just don't steal
You just
anything.
don't spend it, and you're content to do 4 damage instead.
Yeah, for and yeah, and continue building stuff in my transform area, which is
Yeah,
great.
makes sense. Okay. So a late game kill shot, but a
Mhm.
mid game just kind of clean damage dealer that you can option select with.
Yep.
Okay.
And which that rounds out our very clear, like, your neutral is your boosts are the normals. Your attacks have to be valuable in neutral for you to be playable.
Sure.
And they all are. You have an above curve threat, which can do 1,000,000 damage. You have an above curve poke, which will annoy people to death and stuff anything that doesn't have guard on it.
Right.
You have an on curve poke, which can also just leave the planet. Um,
Go to the next
and
board over. Go over to over
yeah,
here.
yeah, good. Yep, advance about 12. I mean, it's only 4, but it feels like 12.
It feels like a lot. Yeah, 4 is a
Yep.
long way to go.
Yep, putting you either at range 3 or 4, both of which are ranges that you're pretty comfortable in. Prefer 3, but again, Death Omen's at 4. And then you have the Sweep Spike. It is, it's weird to call a 1 power card Sweep like. It really is. But it hits at range 1, beats all the things that you care about, and is incredibly rewarding. So it is the
Yeah,
spike
it does
that Sweep
have
wanted to be.
it does have some sweep and spike like properties. So, and again, ignoring the damage numbers, the utility is elsewhere on the card. Their engine building, their dodges, their range 1 command grabby type things. Um, there's a lot of utility baked in here, and there, to your point, there has to be,
Mhm.
because if these are all my boosts, I'm hardly playing Exceed.
Yep.
Or I'm sorry, if this is all my neutral
Or
play,
wait,
I'm
sorry.
hardly playing
Yeah.
Exceed. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. You're extremely limited in what you can do, because if all of this goes away, and then your attack shapes are exactly the normals. If you have 5 specials that are shaped exactly like corresponding normals, your opponent just goes like, okay, so all I have to beat here is a normal shape.
Right.
Speed 7 at range 3 is not a normal shape. Um,
Range
Southpaw
one
is
range
almost a
one
normal
spike
shape, but it's a bit
is
better.
not a
Range
normal
1 spike
shape.
is not a normal shape. Range 4, 7 power potentially, but at least speed 5 is not a normal shape.
Right.
Southpaw would be a normal shape if not for the fact that you can play it at range to duck into things. Like that's it is also a normal shape that doesn't quite exist, in that when you are cornered, it lets
Yeah,
you
it
get out of there.
it's interesting that a lot of times that you've compared these to normals, you've done so by bringing out at least 2, sometimes more cards. This
Yeah,
is Spike
that's the
Sweep.
sweep spike.
This is Dive Cross. This
Mhm.
is Assault Grasp. This is, I guess, uh, Dive plus Dive with Fierce on it or something. Yeah, no, Dive Spike works. Sure. Okay. So all of these are 2 normals in one if we feel like thinking of them that way.
Mhm.
Okay.
And they're fantastic at doing that.
And those are the only 4 specials in his kit.
Evidently, I mean, I definitely pulled these 4 out and said this is kind of the core of it.
Okay.
All right, all right, all right. Let's talk about the most rewarding special. Um, it might seem slightly odd that I say that for last. I swear there's a good reason. Please investigate the stat line in this effect.
3 to 4, 2/4, gain advantage, draw a card, then close 1 or 2. Wow.
So
Okay. So
yeah,
again, everything other than the damage. Uh, the term that Blue uses sometimes that I really like is goodness points, where
mhm,
you know, uh, assault hits for 4, but it moved you 2 spaces, and also you got advantage, and that's clearly worth some amount of cards or life or goodness points. There's a
mhm.
lot on this card other than the damage that is pretty nice upside.
Yep. It does tend to struggle in that if you are standing at range 4 and you initiate a strike, your opponent looks at all your specials and all your normals and goes,
They sweep
"Wait,
you.
really?" Like, yeah,
Yep.
I can just play sweep. And then this gets a lot worse, because in order for this to actually crush a sweep, you need 5 transformations, which is a
Yeah.
notably higher threshold than I've been talking about reliably getting in the mid game at all,
Okay.
sometimes ever. Draw is great. Close is, useful, but also might be very bad.
Right. It would be
Depends.
substantially better if it was close up to 2.
Yeah, no, then this would be a good card.
Yeah.
As it is, I would not really describe it as a good card. I would describe it as a rewarding card. Um, and it gives you a draw, which, hey, we love cards, we love economy, we have very little
Yeah. I
force
haven't
to
I
spare.
haven't seen
Like,
any of it anywhere else in the kit, so we'll take
yeah,
what we
where
can
are my
get. It
boosts that
sounds
draw
like.
cards? Oh wait.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And then there's the most rewarding part of this card. Well, here's Toxic Tendril's Saner cousin. Um, well, I should say Radiation Saner cousin.
Oh
Your normal set
wow.
before you may spend 1 force to close 1.
Okay, so this is effectively extra range.
Yep.
Okay. So range 4 sweep, above curve assault, above curve everything.
Yeah, above curve anything that would not have been above curve, and then a spike that loses only to dive. generally, because if they try to assault in, you just don't close. And if they play anything that loses a spike at range 4, hey, you just play spike, kill them.
So you
Um,
may spend one
you
force if you
may.
do close one.
Yep.
Interesting. So it's another option select. So it's not even committal the way that there's plenty of before close one boosts in the game.
Yeah.
This is something that I can just do whenever I see what my opponent's card is.
Yep. Yep.
Okay,
And
that's
you
really
should not.
strong.
Yeah, and you should not feel like it's beneath you to just play block and let your opponent waste something, and then pay a force to move in and
To,
put block in your gauge.
sure.
Like that is what I call a grappler movement, which this man is not a grappler, but it's the same idea of you are moving inside a strike in a way that doesn't cost you much, if anything. Um, this force cost can be real, but if your opponent threw something that actually would have hit you, then it's obviously good that you ducked it.
Right.
But yeah, this is a phenomenal transformation. It is your single strongest transformation. I almost dislike talking about it, because the fact is that if you have the chance to get this, you should, and it will remodel your game plan in the same way that radiation does. You are now so much stronger than your opponents at this particular range, but you're also more resource intensive than you ever would have been otherwise. You now will have to
Oh,
actually spend more time off, because you probably should be using this a decent amount. You probably should be using this to come in with your assault or your dive from range 4, so that you jump over them instead of just into them. To let your cross hit from range 3, so that you can back out, which gives you now range 5, which means that now you can play a dive that hits from range 5. You get the idea. Like
there.
this gives you the mobility that you like to have, but you're also paying force all the time, and
It,
if you're attacking your gauge, that's not force.
it's incentivizing you well, it's a force sink. It's something that
Yes.
it'll always be useful, but now all of your economy is going to be geared towards doing that.
Yes.
You know what it
Um.
reminds me of, D, is Rose was telling me about Anji from Guilty Gear's Exceed mode, where like
Mhm.
armor is almost always better than guard, uh, but now you're going to be spending a lot more of your force on your ability.
Yep.
So
Yeah. Once you exceed, you go, oh well, I need to make use of this.
this
Partly
is
because of sunk cost fallacy, but also just you go, oh, one force of 2 armor is worth it.
so much better. Wait, where did all of my cards go?
Yep.
Okay. In terms of actual Tournelouse advice, is that economic hit, if you can control yourself, is that economic hit kind of always worth it though?
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
if you can say, I make sure that I'm win this strike and hit my opponent. Don't use this for safety,
Right.
or rather, I should say, don't use it just for safety. Um, but it means you can hit with range 2 grasp, and if you decide to hit with range 2 grasp, then hit with range 2 grasp. Um, but like your objective here is make sure that you're getting a hit out of every time you use this, but be willing to use it anytime. Of course, you don't have to make a decision in advance, but yeah, I did say like always get this transformation. This is a card that if I had EX in hand, I would still have to think about it, because EX Grim Thunder Calling is an attack I'm pretty willing to play.
Sure.
The risk of my opponent crossing out is low because I have Death Omen in my deck, but if they can cross out, I would still hesitate, because now I've lost Grim Thunder Calling. I can't transform this. I can't threaten that transform. That's not good.
Right.
This is the parry bait, though. This is the thing your opponent will parry. This is the thing that they will try to not lose to, because they know full well that if, or we should assume that they know full well that if Hell's Reach is in play, now, as we were talking about how the shape of your cards determines determines the shape of your neutral, because it determines where you are threatening and what pressure means. Uh, this extends everything by one.
Right.
Like, not your specials, but it's still pretty significant to have a sweep that can hit range 4.
But
Pretty
most of the
significant to
cards
have
I
a
want to
cross
be
that can hit
hitting
range
with,
3.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, and it's very, very annoying for your opponent to deal with this, even though often what this means is that they need to drive you to the corner and wait for you to burn out resources and options, and then hit you while you're down, and also not lose the southpaw mix-up, because at some point you will play southpaw to get out of the corner.
To get out of the
And
corner.
there.
So you're a kind of a rushdown melee character, but you mentioned specifically that you're not a grappler.
Mhm.
Um, I know that grapplers tend to hug the middle in Exceed. Like these kind of five
Mhm.
spaces tend to be where they live. Tournelouse, does he just kind of not have that option, so he's going to get cornered more than he does the cornering?
If this transformation exists, I think he will tend to drive himself to the corner, because he's going to be using at some point cross especially, but like he will be trying to put himself a little bit out of his normal preferred ranges so that this can be maximally useful.
Right.
Where he can say, oh yeah, I can threaten range 4 assault, I can threaten range 5 dive, I can threaten a much better range 4 dive than most people have. And that means that he will tend to kind of zone himself by optimizing this. This is not necessarily great. I think it's actually very good that this attack closes, in part, not even though it's not good for the attack itself, it means that you're going to start a little closer, which is, I think, somewhat informative for tourney. You're not a zoner, you never will be.
Right.
But yeah,
And
like
despite that, the play patterns that this boost encourages means that you are going to be trying to be at a range where your attacks just barely hit with the addition of Hell's Reach, which is kind of a zoner thing.
yeah, that's more of a zoner trait.
Interesting.
Without this, I think tourney will tend to hug the center 5, not so much 3. He's extremely threatening at ranges 3 and 4, thanks to the combination of Evil Eye, Lightning Spike, and Death Omen. Which means that like he's not entirely 1 to 3. He is squarely 1 to 4. Death Omen
Right.
really gives him a lot of range 4 threats.
Sure.
So I don't find it as necessary that he is how to put it. I think if he drives the opponent a little farther into the corner, and they get out, he's like, okay, well, you probably didn't get out to range 5 from here.
Right.
Like, so, grapplers will hug the center. I think he will tend to hug the center, but he's much less dependent on it.
Okay. And so to go back to your point about what Hell's Reach kind of does to your opponent's game plan, they will put you here
Yeah,
and
they want
make
you
you
here.
stay here until they lose this mix up.
Yes.
Okay.
And if you lose this mix up, then you probably need to adjust your game plan because now you are in trouble.
Right. Right. Yeah. Now you can't get out of the corner. You can't make use of this awesome transform anymore because you have nowhere to close to.
Yeah, with one exception. Their cross is not good if you have this transformation,
Oh,
because free sweep
true.
catches it.
Right.
So like you still have that going for you, but in most cases, the value of the transformation is negated if you are in this situation.
Right. You've got nowhere to go. Okay.
Mhm.
But still, this is. I mean, like this is a matchup warping transformation. Not every way that it warps a matchup is always 100% in your favor, but it is a controllable thing. It's
Yeah,
something
you
that
can always just choose to ignore it. Having the
right. It
option itself is powerful.
is really strong. Just don't overuse it.
Yes.
Okay. It
Um,
honestly it sounds like I'm sorry to keep on comparing things to other lessons
yeah,
I've heard. It sounds like Joffrey's counterspell. Um what compulsive purification. There we go.
yeah, I know what you
Um
mean.
yeah, where he can say no to a boost, but if he says no to every boost, he's going to burn out his economy.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Um, yeah, this is the more direct one where like you definitely don't want to spend force on every after. But this is also a you really shouldn't be trying to maximize this every single strike.
Right.
Um, it does turn assault and exceed mode into like your second hell's second death omen, where like you have a 1 to 4 4 5 that might also have +3 power from some source or another. In this case from +1 +2. In this case from
Right.
+3.
From +3,
Um,
right.
but yeah, like so yeah, it's undoubtedly a good transformation, but it's a transformation that you shouldn't view as your real character ability.
Okay.
Like notably, it is also an attack that, although I describe it as rewarding, I do think half the reward is the transformation. This is an attack that I would absolutely just transform from hand unless I was reliably certain that I would hit. I think I mentioned that earlier, right? Like if my
Right.
opponent can cross out, I'll still hesitate
Right.
because I would probably rather just discard a copy, transform the other.
Right. You
Um,
really don't want to miss this.
yeah,
You don't want. I'm sorry. You don't want to whiff. You don't want to not get the transform.
yeah. So
Yeah.
like I'm not gonna whiff the EX if I can help it. If I only have one copy, I'm not gonna play the attack.
Right.
Well, maybe not never. Never say never. Matchup or mix-ups are important, but I should save one because if I don't, because I don't need to hit the attack, right? Um, I have 2 attacks that say transform a card from hands. Actually,
Sure.
I have 3, but we haven't seen that one yet. Um, So, like, I can hold Grim Thunder Calling, and unless both of them are gone from my hand, at some point I will almost certainly have the chance to put it into play.
Right. Harry
But
bait notwithstanding, it's quite
yeah,
difficult to deny you this card.
yeah.
Okay.
That said, as hopefully it doesn't just seem like I'm contradicting myself. I can get this if I want it. If you're in a situation where it's useful right away, by all means, transform with these. But very often with these, you should be looking at other things. You should be going, okay, do I need to transform a normal because I need power right now? Do I need to transform, this other thing because I need to retreat out after the next strike in which I play a normal?
Right.
Like what am I giving up forever? With Grim Thunder Calling, I think you're not giving up a very important attack. I think you are paying a relatively low cost for getting this transform. So still fine to do, but think about it. You're not as linear as you might think you look.
This speaks to the reactivity of Tournelouse's game plan that we've been talking about a little bit, because the comparison that you made is to radiation on toxic tendrils for
Yeah,
Remulus. There were no reservations about
no
that. There was
calls on that
no
one.
like, no, you EX transform that the second you see it, and that's the end of the conversation. You get
Yep.
that any way you can. This is very important, but it Tournelouse doesn't have the luxury of having a defined line, it sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah. Like
Interesting.
this is good. It's useful, but that cost is extremely real.
Yeah.
You have maybe one of the worst economies in season 2. I'd have to think carefully. I think I can say accurately Trinity has the worst economy in season 2.
That's and
But there's a few
that
things that
probably
complicate that.
it seems like this is putting him in the running for among the worst economies of any character that I've seen.
Quite right. Yes.
Yeah,
Um,
it's pretty dire.
yep. So like you can't spam this. You can't afford to just always do this, which means that it is going to be a real decision whether that's the best thing you can do. It will always be a good thing to have this transformation,
Right.
but when you're making choices like this, it might not be the best transformation that you can get right then.
Sure.
Um,
Okay. That makes
so that's Grim
sense.
Thunder Calling. Yep. All right. Yeah, that's the card that's sometimes strike with a turn one, so your opponent knows that they have to be where it exists. Usually don't, and then always expect the parry. That is just life.
Right, that's just going to happen to you because of the meta that you happen to be born into. So
Mhm.
your early game then is it sounds like, again, it's incredibly hand dependent,
Mm.
and situation and matchup dependent, the way that kind of all Exceed is. But it sounds like broadly I'm looking to land a couple normals and land a couple of key transforms. What those are going to be is going to depend on the matchup. But once I have a couple normals down, at the very least, I have Death Omen online at range 4 to be really scary if I need it to be. Um,
Evil Eye
that
functions, Lightning Strike functions. Yeah.
all of the stuff that I'm doing is at least workable, but it seems like I've done a lot of work to get myself up to a baseline character rather than what other characters are doing, which is that they kind of start, like, I mean, the character that we have up here might be sort of notable for this. This is just our training dummy, but Ryu being a character who starts really strong, like really dangerous. He gets one gauge, and all of a sudden he's quite threatening. It seems like I'm doing a lot of work to get up to where another character would start.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
You essentially start disadvantaged.
Okay.
This is why I said Trini should be assumed to have a life deficit. If he has a life lead, he's really stomping because he's calling everything out.
Right. Okay.
Um,
So
mhm,
as I'm bringing myself up to parity, am I
mhm.
also like the fact is in the late game these things that are just barely bringing me up to parity are also going to be haymakers. So
Mm.
I'm not quite as far behind as I seem, it sounds like.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So what I like to say is that Trini is always behind until he kills you. Right?
Okay.
Like it's you will have less life than the opponent for most of the game. This does not mean that you are losing.
Okay.
If I exceed as Tournelouse and my opponent has less than 20 life, then they should be very realistically thinking about how I'm going to kill them in 3 strikes.
In 3 strikes, okay.
Um, and I don't even particularly like to use the 13 damage attack.
Right.
I
I
just
mean,
like to
but
hit for 7 or more a few
yeah,
times.
if we're talking about 7 damage from Death Omen twice because you've been curating your hand while you've been managing all of this stuff to have these kinds of setups ready. 7 damage twice is 14. That's about half of your total health bar. That's a lot of
Yep.
damage. Okay.
Yep. And I've hit with literally any normals, then my opponent is probably not at exactly 30. They are probably down to 24 or 20, something
26,
like that,
24, sure.
in that range. At which point I can go, okay, they look like they are winning, but I have built a board of bonuses that I can now spend, and I have to be pretty attentive to which ones I'm spending for what effects, right? I have to go, okay, maybe I actually need +2 guard on something. So the next time I hit with this, I transform it, and then my advantage attack has plus guard because I needed to make sure that my EX assaults had 3 guard and 1 armor, right? Like
Right.
look at things like that and go, if you need something, look for it. Be attentive to what you're doing. But in the late game, you go, okay, I'm going to probably advantage chain you to death using some
He does
combination of
not.
these cards.
This is 3 sources of advantage here with
Yep.
on deck bonus power.
Yeah.
Even
He's really
like
good at just ending the game abruptly by saying I have bonus power and you don't get turns and now you're dead.
okay, and I didn't really put together also that like the exceed cost is 0. We were joking about it being 10 earlier. At any time, I can say I'm ready and
Yeah.
blow the
You,
opponent up. It's all
yes.
set up for a
Yes.
couple of turns, and I'm in way more. I mean, compare that to another 7th Cross character where I might have the perfect hand and the perfect key, 2 of the perfect key transforms, but I'm short that gauge to get
Mhm.
the 5 combined transformation discounts and the gauge cost to exceed. Tournelouse says, if you're ready, end the game.
Yeah. When I'm ready,
Got
I'm
it.
ready.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. This is both mechanically important, and also it's a thematic thing. Just as a note, he's literally a demon, which means him turning into a monster is just sort of him going, yeah, it's me. This is
Right.
me. I'm already a monster.
He's taking his hat off.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is tragic. There should have been a hat in this picture. He is. That's actually, just as a quick aside, what I pulled out was the top tiers. Um,
In terms of excellent 7th
Fedora,
Cross hats.
purple. Yeah. And then Jeanette. I think Jeanette has the best hat. I think Turney is second. You
That
feel free to flame me
these
about
are some
this.
excellent hats. I also really want to shout out the the awesome cigar.
Yes. That. Yeah. Wait, hold on. It's not. Yeah. Okay. I thought it was in all of them. I guess it's not an evil eye.
I feel like the
Um,
fact that the one with the close up on his face doesn't have a cigar is tragic.
it is. Gives
We
you a
need
good
to
look at
put
those pearly whites, but yeah.
a hat on the Bargeist. We need to put a cigar on Evil Eye. After this, I'll go message Moriarty, and we
Yeah, I was about to
can
say, Moriarty, you're on this.
yeah we can get some we can get some help for this poor demon man. Okay, so I'm setting up for these couple of crucial turns. I have a lot of control and flexibility over when exactly those turns are going to happen. I'm incentivized to do it before my opponent is ready.
Yes, and I do want to make a note. It's not. It is not without cost. It is free, but it's not without cost. The text on his card is not written very clearly. The ruling got a little fuzzy, and it was clarified later. Here's what's going on. Your normals have a transformation. That means your specials and ultras have +1
Oh,
power. Which means that they have transformations. You hit with them, you put them in your transform area. You can transform 2 from hand, just like we said. It's just like it's on them.
but the
This side does
Bargeist
not say
said
that.
transformed normal attacks, so the ones that I've already transformed.
Yep, you cannot transform normals once you have exceeded.
Okay, so in terms of play patterns, it actually is quite similar to another 7th Cross character, where my front side is for building my engine, my exceed side is for cashing in or starting the
Yeah,
engine and rolling the
you exceed
opponent
when you're
over.
ready to end the game. You say,
Right.
"I'm exceeding, therefore my opponent is about to die."
But Tournelouse has the advantage of being able to say that that can happen literally at any time that I've determined that I have a critical mass of advantages that I'm ready to kill you with. And that
Yep,
could be turn 6, it could be turn 15.
yep,
Okay.
correct. All right. Speaking of engine builders and engine buttons, here's the ultra that costs negative gauge, sort of.
Generate gauge by sealing your transforms for 1 gauge each, and it's a 2 gauge ultra. Okay.
So when I said that we can think of our transformations as being one gauge, this is part of the reason I said that. Both of his ultras have that clause. You are incentivized to throw everything in transform area and build no gauge. However, I think that's actually often a mistake. You do if you can, you want to pay this cost with real gauge, because then you keep your transformations for other purposes, right?
Right.
And the cards that you're spending don't get removed from the game; they go back in your discard pile, which can be very important.
Right.
So ideally, you spend 2 real gauge. One of them is probably block. One of them is whatever the heck you want, but probably one of these attacks that I just said are so good that you might not want to transform them even.
Sure.
And then transform, a number of cards.
Any number of cards from your hand. Wow.
Yeah. So Bargai's saying is hitting the ignition, right? It's going, okay, I decided that I was taking a little too long playing this game, honestly. Let me convert some gauge into declaring that my end game is here, like, now.
Right now.
It is still important to consider. Transforming your entire hand is awesome. It might be correct. It might not be. Keep in mind the things I said earlier. If you're giving up normals, you're giving up your boosts, and that can be really important.
Right.
You also can't, at the moment, have multiple copies of any normals in your. So it's one of each, just as normal transformations go. And yeah, similarly, probably don't transform Evil Eye. Probably don't transform Death Omen unless you know you need it for a specific reason.
Sure.
But even if you transform Zero, which is the worst way to use this card,
that's any number.
You draw 3.
Yeah, sure, okay.
So it's not terrible, even in that case. But the reason you're playing it is presumably because you have something in your hand, or you have one or more things in your hand that you would like to see in your transformation area, and that you don't currently see a more reliable way to get into play, or that you think will cost you more life. Because, if we assume that you are losing every strike except this one, because we want to assume that you win that one clean, right. Then you go, okay, well, you're trading down with this, it does 1 or 2 damage. You're trading down with this because they played Focus or something, it's 4 damage. You're trading down with Southpaw somehow, I'm not sure how, but I believe it did. Anyway.
Somebody wild swung that weird, like a Tatsu or something.
Yeah, they swung a Crosscatcher and you walked into it.
Yeah.
But like, all right, you trade down each time you get. So like, you trade down to get 1 transformation or 0. You trade down to get 2 gauge probably. You trade down to get 2 transformations maybe. This one trades down to get like maybe 4 to 6 transformations depending.
Yeah.
You're limiting the amount of life that you're hemorrhaging for your setup because you're expecting to lose life for setup. That is your normal game flow.
Right.
This one is just doing it. Yeah.
You by accelerating your game plan, you have limited the number of interactions you need to lose.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
No, that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah, I've never seen transform any. I can't, like, every other 7th Cross character is drooling at this hit effect. Like, this is insane on everybody else. It also speaks to the passive ability that you may generate gauge to pay this attack's cost by sealing. This speaks to what you said earlier, that like your gauge is only for neutral. I know that you probably should be paying this with actual gauge, but you don't have to. It's you have a 0 cost exceed. Your ultras can be paid with transformations. This anything that goes here, you are putting it here probably to change cards or move.
Yep.
Okay, that is just worth underlining again because the ultras are yet another thing that you don't technically need gauge for.
Yep. And on that note, I definitely recommend you put this ultra in your gauge.
Okay.
It is, as it turns out, 2 shiny force symbols when you discard it from your gauge.
And we love this transformation. You may have a 2nd copy of each normal attack in your transformation area. Okay, I understand. So, given what we were saying about the actual utility, like 8 is not feasible. 16 is
even less.
It's way less feasible. All right, so unless I'm like even if I'm only hitting with the same normal twice every time so that I can double up, that's just not happening. It's not worth it.
Yeah, they're long since dead. It's very cool. It does result in some extremely funny things. I have on one occasion, at least one occasion, I know one occasion, hit with Bargai's Fang, transform like nothing, transformed Bargai's Fang, next strike hit with Bargai's Fang, stack up a bunch of double normals.
Right.
Because now I have Bargai's Fang because it was already there. Um, I don't ask me why I didn't transform the second Darkest Flame during the first strike. I didn't think of it then. But anyway, but like you can do so many things with it, but it builds into it feeds into the line of play that I think he suggests that you should do, where you're all transform all the things, play all the other things, but you're giving up a lot to do that.
That is every possible use of your kit. Like that like if you do this, you can no longer turn cards 90 degrees. Like you can't
Yes.
boost anymore.
Yeah, like, and it's if you're after your reshuffle, it's way more acceptable to do this because okay, they were not going to get recycled into your discard anyway, but it still
Right.
means you're throwing boosts out of your hands
Right.
if you do
And it means
normals.
that you're throwing away a potentially perfectly good 2 force.
Yeah, yeah, like you transforming attack from your hand means you can't use the attack. Shock and surprise.
Right.
Um,
Right.
I need to BRB.
Yeah, of course, no problem.
You're fine. Yeah, okay. I think we were just going over like why Bargaze Fang is not
Is an
being transformed.
accelerant.
Yeah, or that. Yeah, okay. Yeah, like it's great to land, but you don't transform it.
Right.
Like that's it plays into your magical best case awesome stuff that you really shouldn't even be thinking about because that's getting rid of all of your normals.
Right.
Oh, that's right. I remember. I was about to say. So post reshuffle, it is pretty acceptable to transform normals with this because you're not wasting a second use of them, right? It's probably the second time you've seen those normals. You have
Right.
hopefully gotten use out of them already, but it still means that now, here at the end of the game, you are getting rid of your only boosts. That's pretty costly.
Yeah, that
Though
can
of course,
definitely still matter.
yeah, though of course it still might be worth it if you look at the numbers and go, well, right now it's dealing 4 damage, and if I add 3 to that, it stuns this card, and that's what
Right.
my opponent played. Suddenly I
Yeah.
care.
So yet again, option selects
Yep.
they're all over the place in this kit. You just look at what you need in the very short term, and it might come up.
Yep. I would also like to note something about this. If you have a card in your hands that is already transformed, well, you can't transform it again. But when you pay this cost, or when you pay this cost, you can seal the first copy because you know you're about to transform the second copy.
Okay.
That way, you still have the transform that you wanted, but you benefit from this effect in full.
So
Because you're
that
mhm.
this only works for normals, which means it wouldn't get around this question I had earlier about Diabolic Might
All right.
that would
I
let
think
you it would make
I
it
think
awkward
hold
to
on.
have +3 power.
Yeah, I think you mean non-normals, right? Like
Yes, I do.
this
Thank you.
effect doesn't. Yeah, this doesn't let you transform normals.
Yes.
Um, yeah. But yeah, so in Exceed mode, you can't gain. Sorry. This is where it comes in, where you go, I'm gonna transform some normals, blow up sweet.
Right.
But this is where you go, okay, I'm going to, after reveal, look at how I pay my cost, look at my hand, and say, okay, I want to keep this transformation, but I have the other copy in hand. I'm not going to bother playing the other copy as an attack this late in the game, so I will pay by sealing this, because on hit I will be transforming the other copy, so I don't
Transferring
actually
the
lose
other copy
anything.
and immediately putting it in. Got it. Okay.
Yeah,
And when
like
we're paying this cost, it's uh generate gauge by sealing your transforms for one gauge each. That means that if I have 1 gauge and 1 transform sealed, I can pay for it that way. I can mix and match.
yeah,
Correct.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, if you have 2 gauge and 2 transformations, then it's your choice what you spend. You
Right.
can 2 transforms, one or
One of
two
each.
transforms, 2 gauge, one of each, your choice.
Yep. Okay.
Um, as normal, if you play it from hand, you must validate if possible. If you wild swing, you have a choice,
That makes
just like
sense
any
to
order.
me. Okay.
Mhm. All right, cool.
I
That's the
have to
kit.
see it
Oh,
again. I have to
right,
see it again.
discard. Yeah.
Yeah.
All
All
right.
right. There's my
Now this one.
13.
All right. This is his most infamous card. If Evil
Yep.
Eye's most infamous special. Uh, okay. Legitimately, I'm not sure which of these is more infamous. They're both pretty infamous, but Netherstorm is legendary. This is a 5 gauge in quotes. 1 of 3, 13/5. Apparently, true power looks like the number 13,
Yep.
according to the flavor text.
Yep, it does. Well, I mean, listen, if you've been living your whole life with ones and zeros on your power, 13 looks pretty true.
Yep, 13 is pretty great. Of course, it's not usually 13. depending on exactly what your setup looks like, there's a decent chance that you can validate this and then still have normals transforms, which means that this often hits for 15 or more.
Sure.
Um,
That's too many.
well, that's a lot. That turns out the opponent probably doesn't have that much life.
Right.
So earlier when I said like this was part of a very specific mix-up, I'm like, well, it's actually not that specific a mix-up. The mix-up is, did you try to cross out of Netherstorm? Oops. Did you try to block Netherstorm? Oops.
Right.
My advantage, and I still have Netherstorm.
Right.
And the fact that you can do that multiple times makes this pretty oppressive in the late game. Where you can just say, and also if the opponent's ever out of blocks, they just die.
They've just exploded. Right.
Yep. The thing that reins this in, the reason Trinity does not have a reputation for being like the most broken character, is that number in the top left corner, 5.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a lot.
It's a lot. 5 gauge ultras run the gamut. There aren't all that many of them. They tend to all have very stupid numbers on them. This one, let's see, there's a 113.6 over in season 1. This is a 103.13.5. Of course, that number is kind of a lie. But 5 gauge is a lot of gauge, and this is a character who, as discussed, needs resources to play neutral because he doesn't have a boost kit. Doesn't really draw cards anywhere. Greatly loves force. And also, if you validate this by ceiling transformations, they're gone forever, which means that if you're playing this, you need it to win the game. It may not end the game that strike, but you need it to decide the game in your favor.
Right. If maybe you hit them with a cross afterward for the last 3 damage, but you beat them by hitting them for 15.
Yeah. If they block this, then
You've
unless
lost.
you crush that block, you've lost. I have had that happen. I've had somebody try to block this and end up dying. Not that turn, but like they took I think like 7. Which, if they just don't have any force, okay, sure, they can die. You're never going to be in that situation because you're Tournelouse. Your economy is worse than your opponent's.
Definitely.
Like they will have more force than you.
Yeah.
So generally, this is an attack that I don't love to throw. I would much rather say, well, what if instead of paying 5 gauge to hit for like 16 or something, I paid effectively 2 gauge twice and hit for 16 or something.
Right. Yeah. So in this particular these cards covering as part of the mix up for Netherstorm, it works almost identically as it would to Death Omen. This is just higher investment for higher reward.
Yes.
Okay. But
yeah.
Higher investment for higher reward right now. You can probably get those power numbers over 2 turns.
Yeah. The reward being exactly. Like I said, I generally am still going to deal that same amount of damage. I like playing Death Omen as a basically a 2 gauge ultra that just destroys people. The numbers on this card are deceptively silly because this is not. Attorney has a lot of access to bonus power. The exceed ability really hammers that home.
Sure.
Yeah.
So when I have Netherstorm, sometimes when we see a 5 gauge ultra, it's like it's impractical. It's Q force. Tournelouse really could use force. Am I usually just using this to play neutral?
So this is where I have to kind of come back to what I said earlier. If this is a thing that I'd like to describe as a player choice, which a friend of mine says that sometimes a player choice just means that some people make the wrong decision. I'm like, okay, but you really do have the choice of, are you going to, like, is this how you win the game? And if so, how are you dealing with your opponent's blocks and parries and readings and whatever else they're doing?
Right.
You need a plan for that. You need to know, I'm going to be running this mix-up. It probably needs to include actual spike because that's another way to be blocked that my opponent needs to know.
Sure.
Like, you can decide that you're running for this, like, you're going for this at a dead run as this is the mix-up that I will end the game with, and I'm fully supporting it with the rest of my play style and the rest of my play patterns. If so, you are committing to that probably when you see the first copy of Netherstorm. Actually, I would say generally, when Turney sees his first copy of Netherstorm, he needs to commit to which way he's playing Netherstorm.
Okay.
And there are, in fact, I would say 3 ways to play Netherstorm. One is, as predicted, the attack. And you need to play it at the end of the game. You need to play it to end the game, or you have lost the game.
Right.
One is as 2 force, and this is perfectly acceptable. This is fine. You love change cards. You don't love walking because like you have a bunch of movement on your attacks, but you'll walk if you have to, and you will certainly change cards to rebuild a hand of sweet, juicy tools, especially EXs.
Sure.
It is also worth noting that the transformation on this card has some very interesting utility. This is, in a sense, Tournelouse's boost. He can discard a card from his hand if he has this transformation in play. He can discard a card from hand. That is to say, pay a force. You can obviously spend Gauge if inclined, but let's assume you never have Gauge because you're Tournelouse.
Right.
To swap a different card in your hand with a card from your transformation area, which does mean that the card in your hand goes in your transformation area, so that has to be legal to begin with. So you are saying, oh, I actually need that assault that I hit with earlier because I'm holding assault, and I would really
Build an
like to
EX
play
assault, D's favorite
an EX
normal.
assault that hits for 8 power. The EX assault is fantastic. So let me put into my transformation area this card that gives my opponent nightmares. And now we're at range 4, and I'm holding an EX assault that probably does 8 damage.
Okay.
That's horrifying.
Yeah,
And it might be the most egregious use case.
that as boosts go, that's a pretty scary boost. So EX transforming Netherstorm is a potential 4-force swing. That's incredibly expensive.
Yeah.
But if I
I think
have it
that's-
in my hand and I hit with
Mhm.
Bargeist Fang,
There you go. I was about to say, I
that
think it's almost never worth EX transforming. I think it's very often worth transforming it with one of
my many
transformers.
ways to sneak transforms in. Okay.
Mhm.
Interesting. All right. So
Yeah, because this lets you say, oh, that normal that was gone forever, actually, it's not.
it's bad. And this is like everything else Tournelouse is doing, it is economy negative. I'm spending 2 cards to get 1 back. Like one of them goes to the transform area. I'm getting value out of it that way.
Yeah.
Especially certainly if it's my before close 1.
Yeah, but economically, it's you are discarding a card and then you end your turn.
Right.
You know.
It sounds like I'm evaluating when to do this extremely tactically when I see a combo like that. Not just like the 3 ways that I could be spending Netherstorm. Look at the board state, evaluate whether I am positive I can get value out of one or the other of those non-force expenditure uses. Otherwise, spend it as force.
In all likelihood, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, if you do get this transformation, so like I really like this transformation. I think it tends to be very interesting because it lets me create a late game out of early game stuff that is otherwise
it's gone.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm now saying the stuff that was gone forever I can bring back and it will kill you.
Right.
So I'm a fan of it. When I get it, I still tend to use it maybe once or twice in a game.
To get something like this.
But it gets back the thing that wins. It gets back the thing that I need and that matters.
Right.
It gets back the assault. It gets back the reading. It gets back the speed 7.
These are all boosts too, and that can matter a lot. Okay.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever returned block with it, but I think I have returned at least every other normal at least once with it.
I can see it. I mean, assault and sweep are great attacks. Reading, way to beat block. Tech, speed 7, movement option. Yeah, I like these are like everybody needs these cards most of the time. You're gonna use it for something.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. It's also kind of interesting in that you put in, like I said, the thing you put in is a thing that you probably don't need that much right now. There's our block.
Right.
The thing you take out, it's not in your transformation area anymore, right? If I hit with the CX Assault, cool, I can now transform Assault again. So it might not be as much of a long-term cost as it looks. Although honestly, by the time that I'm doing this, chances are it is because I'm exceeded. It is because the thing I'm picking up is part of the 2 cards that will kill my opponent.
Right. You're no longer able. On the one hand, you're no longer able to transform those cards again because you're the Bargeist now. On the other hand, why do you care? You're killing your opponent.
Yeah, like if you do it early enough, then you can still bring back the things that you want, and your setup looks a little different. It's just not when I usually do it.
Okay.
Yeah, like I said, usually I do it here and I'm killing my opponent. But if you have it here, then you can pick something up, transform it again, and
mitigate some of those long-term costs. Yeah. Okay.
Which notably does mean Attorney is one of the characters who can just say, okay, I hit with sweep, cool, pick sweep back up. Okay, I hit with sweep.
I
Okay,
hit with
cool.
sweep,
We'll
yeah,
sweep that
and
guy.
and
Okay, I
just
hit with sweep.
just value your opponent to death that way.
Yep.
Okay.
Like that will not reliably happen, but it is hypothetically possible.
And
Just
it's
costs you
strong
the
when it does
miss.
work. I mean, sweep is a good card.
Yeah, it turns out of all the cards you could be looping, sweep and focus are pretty
Yeah, those are pretty
good.
good. So again, we come back to this reactivity. If I'm getting something back, it's in order to it's I'm looking at my opponent's kit, finding what they can't deal with. Not what they can't deal with necessarily for the rest of the game, but what they can't deal with right now in this moment that will kill them.
Hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm not a counter puncher. I'm not a Shoto. I'm not Ryu standing exactly where my opponent can't deal with me, or Kai, who is able to sort of shape his kit into being something that they can't deal with. This is a very pinpoint.
Yeah.
You can't deal with
Yeah.
this right now and take 8 and you're dead.
Yep.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I regard Tourney as a rush town, and because the posture of all of this is I'm looking for. He's very light on his feet, not just because his attacks are fast, but because he is adjusting his posture to say, "Oh, I see where your opening is. I will, punch you in the kidneys. I will jab you in the neck. I will do the thing that you are currently not resilient against.
Right.
And then once you're out of breath and I'm not, I will kill you." Which is
Okay.
ironic because
And
like you'll always have more resources than him, but by the end of the game, it won't matter.
it won't matter
Uh,
because you're dead. So this kind of again goes back to that the thing you said very early in the lesson, that in some ways he's the most seventh cross characters, in some ways he's the least. This is not a seventh cross play pattern. What you're
it plays
describing
so much
is,
Exceed.
yeah, this very reactive, interactive game where you are not running the line, but you are getting what you need. This honestly sounds pretty familiar to people who are more used to more modern Exceed.
Yep. That's exactly right. That's why I think of him as being that, and that's actually really what I like the most about him myself. Like I said, I'm not a tourney main, but I do enjoy him a lot, and it's because you can play very adaptively. You can go, yeah, I'm not beholden. I'm not attached to any of my transformations. They're all pretty much as good as well, except for Hell's Reach. They're all pretty much as
Right.
good as all the other ones except for Hell's Reach. But uh, I can use them all, and I can find times to use them. And also the long term decisions that I'm making are very real, and but very powerful.
Yeah.
So like I really enjoy that. I've seen people like I've seen people multiple times find the line for tourney and try to mash it and run it again and again, and then decide that it just doesn't really work.
And
Uh,
therefore he's bad.
and therefore he's bad.
Yeah.
But there was an infamous line quite some time ago that was the full on seven cross tourney. I don't remember if we gave it a nickname or not, but you mulligan four specials. You change cards all of your specials and ultras. You draw normals, and then you EX transform normals aggressively, and then you try to play late game specials. This is terrible.
Yeah.
Um, it I saw people do this and occasionally have some success. I think it is not remotely reliable because you are throwing away a bunch of useful tools for various options and threats. Where I'm like, yeah, no, this is range 1 spike. This is speed 4. Speed 5, range 4. This is speed 7, range 3. But also, you're just willingly discarding all your normals. Normals are good.
Yeah, and you're
Um,
discarding your ability to play neutral, you're discarding all of your important boosts.
yep. And before that, there was the reverse, where people were trying to. Well, again, at least some. This is not necessarily everyone is doing this, but I saw the. Okay, we are going to just play specials until we have a critical mass of all these bonuses, so now we can play our normals and we're awesome.
Right.
And that like looked a little better, um, because turns out you have normals, you can play neutral, you can play boosts, but still tended to fall apart when folks weren't willing to decide that they needed to pay a cost to do a thing because I'm mostly comfortable, but I need two more armor, and I'm willing to sacrifice maybe my best transformation to do it because it's the right thing right now.
Right.
It is a cost that sometimes you have to pay.
Right. I mean,
Um,
the comparison to the Faustian bargain sort of makes itself, right? Like you've got your demon character who's saying, "Well, what have you got to lose by giving up your best thing to kill your opponent right now?" I mean, clearly the value speaks for itself.
mhm. Yeah,
That's really cool.
just so you need to look at your transformations as both tools and fuel. You need to recognize that your normals are like the core of everything you do.
Right.
And then see all of these as ways that you supplement your normal play. Um, well, okay, the ultras are kind of their own thing. But, engine button, kill switch.
Yeah, absolutely huge haymaker. So normally we kind of progress the lesson by talking about economy and what you do with your normals, but it sounds like A, we've sort of already done that. And B, the answer to those questions is so flexible and freeform that the answer really is be flexible and freeform with it.
Yeah, I mean,
Like
you will.
you've said that there are very few cards that you have never transformed. There's very few cards that you've never let go to gauge. Like kind of everything is on the table, and you really do need to evaluate for yourself what you're doing with your cards in the moment.
Yeah, with this exception.
Right?
Um,
Yeah.
but I usually don't transform this one, but there have been times that it's the right thing.
Right.
Sometimes it's right.
And
Um,
among the normals, the decision that you're making to keep options live, it sounds like the use case or the just sorry, it sounds like the situation needs to provide a justification for you to transform normals rather than for you to let normals go to gauge.
yeah, past the second at least. The
Okay.
first two are really important because they give you the lightning spike threshold, and that threshold is like the break point you need for this card to be good.
Right.
Well,
That
for this
that
card to be
matters.
great.
Even one will turn evil eye
One
to
turns
a
this on, two turns this on, uh, three makes this one completely stupid.
right.
But like you don't need this one that quickly. You want this one very early. You want this one very early.
Right.
Having lightning spike alive means that you're less likely to get swept in the early and mid games, and that keeps you alive a bit longer.
Okay.
Um,
And those normals that you are likely to transform, it's probably not going to be these three. It might be Spike, but man, do you need Spike for Netherstorm for threatening that block? Like all of these are going to be useful for something. So
they're all
finding
useful
what
for something, and and it can be hard. And sometimes you will transform sweep or focus, and you'll go, man, I didn't want to do that, but I need it. I need to transform at least one. I need to
right,
start building toward these cards being good.
right,
I
okay,
will. I will note this. Dive as a special case. This boost is great for dealing with opponents' setups if they have them, and if they don't have them, then you can transform this because you do not need dive. You have dive and also dive.
yeah,
Uh,
okay,
so as an attack shape, dive is one of the least important to you.
okay,
Um, that specifically I want to call out. Like spike is still important because it ignores armor. All the others are important for their own purposes. You don't really need to play cross as an attack, but a boost is often still
boost
like
seems great.
reasonably useful.
And also the attack is also something that you could use, as you said, to set up Death Omen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
So there's
and
still
and it's a
something
reliable
there.
hit, so it's like, yeah. I often will transform cross because having hit with it, I got out of it what I needed from it, and now I'm at the range to play some follow up that is stronger because I have cross transforms.
Right, right, right. That makes sense. So you're not really planning to do it twice, or certainly not four times over the course of a game.
Yep. But yeah,
Okay.
the only attack shape that doesn't have significant
Okay.
value among your normals is dive. Uh, in my opinion, of course.
Okay. That makes sense. And that speaks to the sort of the economic reality of this character, which is just you need to sort of figure it out as you go. There's some good heuristics, but really it's more than most characters. You got to kind of find it in the moment, it sounds like.
Yeah, be dynamic, be flexible. Do not look at yourself as a seventh cross character, or you will probably go down a rabbit hole and find that you are dead before you do the cool stuff that you hoped you would be able to do.
Okay. Yeah,
Um,
that makes sense. Think of him as a weird sort of guest character from another season.
yeah, like I mean, take a where I've lost the character card.
Oh,
Um,
he's right here.
oh, thank you. Wow, I'm blind. All right. Um, this man is wearing spiked knuckles. Uh, think of him as a Street Fighter character. Think of him as uh, a boxer. Not he's not Vega, but I'm just like he's just gonna punch you. He is not a radioactive. Like he may be literally a demon, but he's not doing anything super weird in combat. He is just punching you.
Okay.
Um, he punches you. He punches you. He might be like punching you with lightning. I'm not actually sure what's happening here.
It's like
He hits you with his cane.
yep.
He punches you.
Yep.
He looks at you funny. All right, I'll give you that one's weird. Um,
And this one is he kills you.
I was gonna say this one he just kills you. I don't know what to say about that.
Yeah,
Um,
that's not a martial arts technique that I know of, but it seems to work for him.
I don't know. I've there's such a thing as a guillotine throw. Um,
Oh, okay, yeah, that's fair.
don't do not try this at home. Anyway, uh,
Yeah, also don't try any of the stuff he's doing at
don't do any
home.
of these at home.
Yeah. So it sounds like that's the kit. That's the broad game plan. Should we move into counterplay and then wrap it up?
Sure. Yeah.
All right. So
Uh,
what are my opponents probably doing to stop this guy? How am I adapting my game plan to deal with that?
yeah. So if you're a zoner, then zone him. That might sound obvious, but as we've seen, his range goes out to 4 really effectively. He's great at 1 to 3. He's actually pretty good at 4 because Death Omen is a really horrifying card.
Yep.
Um, and then it stops. Range 5, nope. This man does not have a projectile. Uh, his only projectile-like thing is Grim Thunder Calling, and it still loses to sweep on turn 1. He does not have the move don't move mix up that
Right.
a lot of characters relish on turn 1, where he can say, I'm striking and you don't know if I'm coming in. No, he's striking and you don't know if he is playing block or coming in. Those are his
Right.
options.
Right.
Which, he might play block. If you play a sweep, awesome, he wins. He gets gauge, you lose a sweep. That's great. But yeah, like he's constantly going to be moving toward you. If you are a zoner, do what you can. Watch out for Southpaw. This is how he will try to duck in, which means occasionally you will have to throw some janky range mix-ups where you go, I'm Sagat at range 6, and I strike, and he plays Southpaw to get into the low tiger shot, and now he eats sweep,
Sure.
right? Like sometimes you need to do that kind of thing. Um, Notably, don't set his face up, or he will know that you're
Yeah.
playing it. But
Yeah.
anyway,
That's not a mix up at that point.
yeah, like you will need to run mix-ups to keep him out. Mainly because of Southpaw. His stuff will generally force him into you. He's not likely to use Grim Thunder Calling as an attack for the reasons I described earlier. And if you are a zoner, chances are you have things that beat this attack. It does not have a really impressive stat line. It's just very high reward.
Sure.
Um, at close range, he tends to be predisposed to play Lightning Spike or good old-fashioned normals. And if he has you cornered, you can often get over him with dive. Of course, that is itself its own mix-up, which means that he can just catch you with grasp or something like that. Use your tools to make distance. If you're I should say this actually. If you're a resource-oriented zoner, if you're somebody like Sagat or Lily, great. He hates that. He has to use Southpaw to come in against you because he does not have draw. He does not have an economy. If
Right.
you are drawing cards while making space, he will just have to ditch his hand. Probably he will not be able to play an Ultra ever because he just has to pay all his force to stay close to you.
Right.
That's good for you. You do not want this man to land an Ultra. One of them kills you and the other one does just about as
Facilitates
bad.
killing you.
Yeah. One of them kills you, and one of them leads into killing you. So you get the theme here. It's not good for you.
Right. Right. It won't be good.
Yep. Um, yeah, you will have to suffer under his mix-ups, but they are still fundamentally mix-ups. If you can play your own boost game, if you have any kind of special ultra boost, and chances are you do because you're not Tournelouse, then strongly consider. Well, okay, Galdred doesn't really, but anyway, strongly consider like how do I make my boost kit make him look like he doesn't have a boost kit because he
He
doesn't.
doesn't. He doesn't have a
Uh,
boost kit.
Yep, he is entirely dependent on the normal boosts, and that means that most people can obtain a neutral edge against him.
Okay.
Uh, he has a neutral presence because of his attack shapes, but that's about it. He is not built for neutral. He will never have good neutral. That is his life. He's blessed by having good ranges, good cards. He will be able to threaten you out to range 4. Even if you're a zoner, speed 5 is still a concern in most cases, especially if he initiates, especially if he has EX. Um, but yeah, it. All right. Sorry, space.
All good. So if you're a zoner, you zone him out. You probably are going to have better economy, better neutral than him. If you, I assume, if you can brawl with him close up, you brawl with him close up because that's what you're trying to do anyway.
Right. If you're not a zoner, then you look at these power numbers and you go, okay, I I just need to beat this. Like, let's go. It does mean you have to watch your positioning because letting him land a free lightning spike, letting him land a southpaw, you have to go, okay, this card actually wins. Do not disrespect this because it has 1 power. It will you will be the saddest person if your sweep loses to this card.
Sure.
Like, that is a problem. You will also be very sad if he lands a southpaw, escapes the corner for free, goes to range 600 where he can threaten Death Omen. Like, he's very mobile. He's very fast. You need to respect those things, but also you are going to be winning the early game, so win it hard.
Right.
Win it very aggressively. He himself is rush down, but try to rush him down. You want to be dealing. You want to make it as costly as possible for him to build his engine to get into late game, because his late game, more than most characters, is a death machine that will just kill you.
So the thing you were saying about, well, yeah, Tournelouse is planning to exceed at a life deficit. If he's at a life advantage, he's really winning. Make it so that that life deficit is impossible to overcome.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Like, you look at, if you have 20 life and Tournelouse has less than 10, you can go, okay, I don't die to another storm. I don't die to 2 Death Omens.
Right. I have
Like,
one more. He can hit me one more time before I'm in range of death.
exactly.
Okay.
Which doesn't sound like much, but it matters a lot.
Oh, sure.
Because you're also, chances are he's in a situation where you can hit him twice and he will die. So if he can hit you twice and you die, then neither of you's one hit away. That means that you are able to participate in neutral and deal with pressure and counter pressure. Like, you have a foot to stand on.
Right.
It's also particularly useful to try to bait out this ability. If he feels like he has to use the armor effect because he's being pressured by you at close ranges, then that's burning fuel that he would prefer to use to kill you with power. If he spends power and whiffs, he is a very, very sad puppy.
Aw.
He probably will not let that happen. But if you can find a way to make it happen, by all means, of course, make that whiff, because
Hold an unexpected EX, use your speed dodge, some kind of trick that your character has that might be able to make him burn himself out.
yep, find those answers, and also watch what he's sealed. Or sorry, not just sealed, sealed and transforms. Those cards are, for the most part, out of the game, which means that you can think very long term. In case Tourney wasn't, about, okay, once we get to late game, he has one fewer sweep, one fewer tech, one fewer cross, whatever it is he has over here,
Right.
and think about your own normals and how they stack up. Even if you're not playing with the same set of normals, you can look at these options and go, okay, him giving up this gave up a significant amount of speed budget, as it were. What do I have that I can use now to contest that? Him
Sure.
giving up both of these means that he has one slow left that I care about, other than the other copies, that is. I should probably not be playing my fastest pokes. I should probably be trying to outtrade him, and I should probably not be playing mid speeds. I should be playing things that outtrade him.
Right.
But yeah, look at kind of his board that he's built. Oh, and accept that you will lose to this. Don't worry about it.
Yep. Just it's the cost of doing business. Just kill him anyway.
Yeah, because what you want is for you to initiate and for him to beat you with Evil Eye. Because if he initiates and plays Evil Eye, it means that he has decided he's advantage chaining you into lethal. In all
Oh,
likelihood.
okay. Yeah. So you'd rather see this go down when it's not killing you.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
If you deprive the advantage value of this, chances are you have made him play it at a very unfortunate time for him.
Okay.
Obviously, it's still bad if you played your own Netherstorm and you're like, oh well, now I'm stunned. That would be awful. But still, don't hesitate to play things that lose to it just because they lose to it.
Right.
He
Don't
will play it at some point.
Don't overcommit a ton of resources to beating it or to throwing something into it where he can easily deny you value, but you're gonna lose something bad to it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that generally should be fine. Like I said, if he has to use it as a defensive option, it means he's not using it as an offensive option. Good for you.
Yep. Makes sense to me. All right.
Okay.
Anything
I guess the
else?
converse,
Oh yeah,
the
please
counter
go ahead.
counterplay, right?
Yes, please.
Yeah. By the same token, right? If you're up against owners, you will need Southpaw for movement. You will need ultras for movement. Just expect that you're going to have to be paying force to get in. Many zoners will have something that beats Netherstorm clean, so I just recommend you avoid that line. If you are going to do that line anyway, then hold EX Netherstorm, not just one.
Okay.
That will probably beat it, whatever they're planning. Most people do not beat EX Netherstorm. A few do, specifically with their own ultras or with certain EXs and a few other cases.
Yeah,
But
1 to 3, 13 plus 6 speed is tough to beat, though.
it's a stat line.
That's a stat
Yep,
line.
Yep, and in all cases, I highly recommend landing a lightning spike for the extra gauge, playing good old fashioned normals, especially focus for trading acceptably, building gauge, and then trying to pay gauge for Bargai's Fang to put it back in gauge because you're trading 2 force for 2 force and also drawing 3 cards, regardless of whether you transform anything.
Right.
Like, these are all ways that you can kind of sustain your resources despite not having much in the way of resources. Like, it's something. You know, 2 non-ultras out of gauge and 1 ultra in gauge means that you didn't go force negative, other than the fact that you played it from hands.
And other than, I mean, actually, never the amount of force engaged matters more than the amount of gauge engaged to you for the
Correct.
most part. Okay.
By far.
Okay.
Mhm.
That'll make sense. So that's what we've got. That's our character. I occasionally ask you, D, for other characters who are like this guy that fans of maybe lapsed fans of Seventh Cross might rediscover by coming back into Modern Exceed and experiencing a character a little bit like Tournelouse. It kind of sounds like him being sort of a transplant from a more modern season. He might be right at home. Um,
Yeah.
are there
I
any characters that are notable for having similar play patterns to Tourney?
So the answer may surprise you. I if you like the promise of Tourney, but you don't actually like what I've described. If you look at the character who can transform literally every card in his deck, and you go, man, I want to play that character who just ramps up to be an unstoppable monster. And then you heard me describe how this character plays in my estimation. You went, oh wait, hold on, he's just
That's not what I
playing
wanted.
normals, and yeah, like then I do have a recommendation for you. It's a feature, not a bug.
Okay, yeah. So a lot of engine building, a lot of early game awkwardness to make way for some really nonsensical payouts in the late game.
Yep, and your ultimate goal is to say, I am playing my cards, they hit you and they kill you.
Yes.
Um, and I'm paying some cost for it, and I had to think about what that cost was and set it up in advance. Like, that actually is. It looks a lot like what his Exceed mode looks like if you are viewing them both as engine characters. That's not how I actually think of turning.
Sure.
Um, but that's so on one side of the scale, yeah. If you like the idea of I'm all about the engine, you've got Arakune, who is yeah, there to kill people, but does it in an extremely complicated way. He does a lot of math
Right.
first.
And honestly, you also have, to some extent at least, the rest of Seventh Cross.
That is very true. Yeah, if you like the idea of Seventh Cross dynamics, but you don't want a character who doesn't really use them, hey, look, there's a whole season.
Yeah, may we interest you in the Seventh Cross characters who play like Seventh Cross characters, the Seventh Cross
Yep,
characters.
as it turns out.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I feel like most of them are not as nimble. The one that stands out is probably Zolt in terms of in-strike movement. This is obviously not a coincidence. But they have similar features. They are light on
Right.
their feet. They move during strikes. They're very happy to do that. Uh, that is a significant part of Zolt's identity, though that has been lost over time, I think. By reputation, I mean. It still is there. It's just
Yeah,
people don't talk
that's
about
not
it
the
enough.
first thing people know about him anymore.
Yep. But yeah, very much, very, very mobile. I'm trying to think if there's anyone else who has this delectable suite of answer tools that I love so much. Most of them give things up uh, that make it feel pretty different. But this really is a nice set of threats, mix-up tools. He gives up damage in a way that later seasons don't. Of course, like if you play a Street Fighter character, you will not have Prince's power of 0.
Right,
That's
yeah.
or 1. Like that's
Again,
no.
our training dummy here has never seen a power number less than 4 in his entire life.
Yep. I think in the season, with the exception of Dan, there is one printed power lower than 3.
Cammy has Cannon Spike, and that might
That's the
be it.
one. That's the one I
Yeah,
was thinking of.
that might be it.
Yep.
Wait,
I think that might
is
be it.
Lightning Legs 2 or 3?
3.
Okay. Yeah, no,
Yep.
yeah, that it
I
is
think
a
it's just that one.
everybody ate their Wheaties that season. Everybody's real strong.
Yep. Which does mean that you don't have to go through a bunch of hoops to hit for a lot of damage. Which, on that note, if you like how I described Turney, which is not that he's an engine character, but that he is making decisions. Street Fighter is often more about the like the immediate resource game than with Street Fighter. you hit with an attack, you can put it in your gauge. You're not deciding if you're going to be removing it from the game for some other benefit in a different way. That decision is not there.
Right.
However, you know, the experience of uh, I'm being reactive to what my opponent is doing. I am playing a kind of answery character who has better stats in the right situations. Um, this is actually like a lot of what I like about Vega.
Hmm.
I brought him out not because I thought he was similar, but there are some similarities. Um, of the released Street Fighter characters, Vega is somebody who does have an emote that says you die.
Yep.
Does have an extremely punishing resource game, maybe the worst in season 3. Um, I have to think about that, but I think there's a very good chance he has the worst economy in season 3.
Yeah, he's really
Um,
got a rough time if he ever whiffs a card or something.
yep. And then a suite of specials that are all quote unquote bad, but serve very important functions. Which this is not a Vega lesson. I assume we already had one. I don't actually remember, or someone
I
else
have
did.
not had a Vega lesson.
Oh, well,
I've
look
got to
forward to
talk.
that then.
I'm planning to talk to Blue about Vega at some point, but I'm very much looking forward to it because I don't know much about him.
Yeah, he has some answer buttons. He has to use them carefully because everything is very committal. Um, but he does just kill you at the end of the game.
Yep.
And then this one's out there. This is my answer may surprise you character. I think that Geo is an acceptable answer here. Now, I am not a Geo main. I am actually kind of bad at Geo. But as I watch other people play Geo well, I go, oh, you're being both highly pressuring and very reactive. You are doing things that situate you to answer stuff, and you're using your attack shapes not as beat sticks, but as tools.
Sure.
Some of them very nasty tools.
Yeah,
You've got a range one spike. You've got a speed
you've
six.
got Sepultura to sort of back up at range 3. You've got some kind of weird answers mixed in there. I guess the difference is Giovanna draws cards a lot.
Giovanna draws cards and Giovanna plays neutral. That is one of the things is that there's no. It's hard for me to think of somebody who is like Tourney. Like I think Vega might be closer. Somebody who says, my neutral's kind of bad. Um, my pressure is fantastic,
Right.
and also I'm a late game character. Um, Getting that combination, uh, I'm struggling to think of. Maybe Waldstein? I'm not actually sure.
Okay. I can see that.
Hmm,
So, but I mean, to answer the question, like there are going to be elements of Tournelouse that exist in other characters, and depending on why you like the guy, if you like him because of his awesome headwear, we've already demonstrated that you have
yep.
options over here. Something about this character is resonating with you, or something about one of these characters is resonating with you. You might find a commonality
Yeah.
with Tournelouse
Explore
and
and see
maybe
what you
try him
like.
out.
And if you find that you don't like the other characters, then you can go, okay, well, the things that I like about Tourney are not those things.
Right. Sure. And
Let me
or
try other characters.
if you love Vega but not Giovanna, for example, that might
Mhm.
inform how you're thinking about Tournelouse, and that will obviously change your perspective
That
on
means
him.
that means that you enjoy struggling in neutral, is what that means.
Yeah, right. May we interest you in some grapplers?
Yes.
Okay. And also maybe I might be again, I was not around for Seventh Cross, but if you are the kind of player who enjoys going slightly against the meta and playing characters that other players have sort of passed up, it seems like Tournelouse might be a character that you're interested in, deservedly or not. He's somebody that has not been quite as explored as the Reneas or the Minatos of the world.
Yeah, I think a lot of the folks who really dove into Seventh Cross looked at these characters who build really complicated engines, and then looked at Tournelouse and went, "Wait, is that it? Like I've got one shenanigan, and everything else is just honest stats."
Yeah, I don't know about
Uh,
I don't know how to deal with this.
yeah, like I do think he tends to, despite the weirdness of not having a boost kit, because Street Fighter does not have bad neutral, but he does feel like in a lot of ways he feels more at home in Street Fighter in the Street Fighter cast where he goes, "Hey, I'm just here to play a mix up and then hit you for 7."
Sure.
Um, like he has so much worse neutral than anybody in Street Fighter, so it's hard to say that. But that's
But the
probably
the core
yeah.
fantasy of the Tournelouse you're describing is a little bit more this season than this season.
Yep.
All
Oh
right.
yeah, and if the one thing that you liked was this card, play like any grappler.
Sure. Yeah.
Um,
They've got some kind of stupid haymaker somewhere.
yeah, find the card with the highest printed power on it. It's probably on a grappler. You'll get there. I believe in
Yep.
you.
Yep. You'll probably be able to do it. It might not be
Shout out
on
to
curve at
non-gamers.
range 3, but you'll find something that scratches that itch.
Yeah. Uh, okay. Yeah. So that was the similar characters. I can't think of anything else. Questions, comments?
No, that's about it. I feel like this is one of the characters. I mean, I've made it a point for everybody Seventh Cross and Red Horizon to go in as blind as possible. I know nothing about this guy, and I feel like I've done my job by going from absolutely zero knowledge to a reasonable amount of knowledge. Hopefully, that has been the experience of people who are watching this as well. D, this has been awesome as always. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for yours. I had a good time.
Yeah, it's great talking to you. I'm looking forward to doing it again soon. Folks watching at home, thank you so much as well. Appreciate your time and your attention. I'll see you all for the next one. Goodbye,
Oh,
everybody.
and stay hydrated.
Please do stay hydrated. Bye, everybody.
Bye.